Welcome to History and Sleep, the channel where we dive into the remarkable, the unforgettable, and the stories that shape our world, all while helping you drift into a state of calm and reflection. Tonight, we're exploring a tale of one of history's most pivotal moments, the fall of Constantinople. This is the story of how the mighty Byzantine Empire met its end in 1453 as the Ottoman forces, led by Sultan Mehmed II, breached the legendary walls of the city. It's a story of strategy, innovation, and the indomitable will of both sides, an event that reshaped the world and marked the end of the Middle Ages. As you listen, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's incredible to see how stories like this connect us across time zones and borders. If you enjoy unraveling the past and discovering hidden war stories, don't forget to subscribe to History and Sleep for more. For over a millennium, Constantinople stood as a marvel of human ingenuity and resilience. Perched strategically at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, its location made it a hub for trade, culture, and power. The city's imposing walls, originally constructed by Emperor Theodosius II in the 5th century, were considered nearly impregnable. These triple-layered fortifications, stretching for miles, were the pride of the Byzantine Empire and the bane of invaders. By the mid-15th century, however, the Byzantine Empire was a shadow of its former self, reduced to the city of Constantinople and a few scattered territories. The once mighty empire that had ruled vast regions now found itself encircled by the rising power of the Ottoman Empire. To the east, Sultan Mehmed II, an ambitious and brilliant leader, had set his sights on conquering the city, seeing it as the key to solidifying his rule and expanding his domain. Inside the walls of Constantinople, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos faced an uncertain future. With only a few thousand defenders, comprised of weary Byzantine soldiers and a handful of foreign allies, the city was woefully underprepared for the onslaught that loomed. Supplies were dwindling, and the population, though fiercely loyal, lived under the constant shadow of impending doom. Yet, despite the odds, the emperor refused to surrender. He was determined to fight to the end. As the Ottomans prepared for their siege, they brought with them an arsenal unlike anything the world had seen before. Among their weapons was a massive cannon, constructed by a Hungarian engineer named Orban. This cannon, capable of hurling enormous stone projectiles, was designed to breach even the strongest walls. The Ottomans also amassed a fleet to blockade the city by sea, ensuring that no reinforcements or supplies could reach the defenders. This stage was set for an epic confrontation that would decide the fate of Constantinople, and, with it, the Byzantine Empire. Imagine the tension that gripped the city as its inhabitants prepared for the siege. Picture the anxious faces of soldiers standing watch on the walls, the whispered prayers in the Hagia Sophia, and the determination etched on the emperor's face as he rallied his people. As you visualize the city on the brink of one of history's most defining moments, let its story remind you of the face of overwhelming odds. The tale of Constantinople begins not with surrender, but with hope, a flickering light against the encroaching darkness. On April 6, 1453, the Ottoman forces began their assault on Constantinople. Sultan Mehmed II, commanding an army of nearly 80,000 soldiers, surrounded the city by land and sea. His troops included elite janissaries, heavy artillery units, and cavalry, all meticulously prepared for the battle. In stark contrast, the defenders of Constantinople, numbering only about 7,000, relied on the strength of their walls, their limited resources, and their unwavering determination to hold off the invaders. As the siege commenced, the Ottoman cannon began its relentless bombardment. Each thunderous shot shook the ground, sending massive stones crashing into the city's formidable walls. The defenders scrambled to repair the damage as quickly as possible, working day and night to reinforce the crumbling sections. Yet, despite the damage, the walls of Constantinople held firm, frustrating the attackers and delaying their advance. By sea, Mehmed's fleet blockaded the Golden Horn, the narrow inlet that provided access to the city's harbour. In a bold and desperate move, the Byzantines constructed a massive chain boom across the entrance to the harbour, preventing Ottoman ships from breaching this vital area. For weeks, the two sides engaged in fierce skirmishes on the water, with neither gaining a decisive advantage. Within the city, life became a mix of hope and despair. Citizens prayed fervently in the grand Hagia Sophia, seeking solace and strength. Meanwhile, Emperor Constantine XI worked tirelessly to inspire his people, walking among the defenders on the walls, offering words of encouragement and sharing in their hardships. His presence was a source of unity in a city under siege. Sultan Mehmed II, determined to break the stalemate, devised a bold plan to outflank the city's defences. Using an extraordinary feat of engineering, he ordered his troops to transport ships overland on greased logs, bypassing the chain boom and launching them into the waters of the Golden Horn. This manoeuvre shocked the defenders and marked a turning point in the siege. As the weeks wore on, the defenders of Constantinople grew more exhausted. Supplies dwindled, and morale wavered as the walls suffered greater damage, yet they continued to resist, determined to protect their home against all odds. Imagine the long nights spent on the battlements, the glow of torches illuminating weary faces, and the echoes of cannon fire reverberating through the air. The siege was becoming a battle of attrition, with both sides pushing their limits. The city remained a symbol of defiance, even as the odds seemed increasingly insurmountable. The question lingered: how much longer could Constantinople hold out? As April turned to May, the siege of Constantinople escalated into a relentless struggle. The Ottoman bombardment grew fiercer, cannons fired day and night, chipping away at the once mighty Theodosian walls. Dust and debris filled the air, coating the streets and homes of the city. Despite the constant destruction, the defenders worked tirelessly to repair breaches, often under the cover of darkness. Every stone they placed was an act of defiance against the overwhelming forces pressing in around them. Inside the city, the mood shifted between grim determination and quiet fear. Emperor Constantine XI continued to rally his people, addressing soldiers, citizens and priests alike. His words were simple but powerful, reminding them that they were fighting not just for their lives but for their culture, faith and history. Families huddled together in their homes, offering whispered prayers for protection. In the Hagia Sophia, the city's spiritual heart, the clergy led solemn services, their chants echoing in the grand dome chamber. Outside the walls, Sultan Mehmed II adjusted his strategy. Recognizing the defenders' stubborn resistance, he ordered his engineers to dig tunnels beneath the city's walls in an effort to weaken their foundation. Byzantine forces countered this threat by sending teams of sappers to intercept the tunnels, leading to deadly confrontations beneath the ground. These underground battles, fought in narrow, dimly lit passageways, added another layer of desperation to an already harrowing siege. The Ottomans also intensified their efforts on the Golden Horn. The fleet, now partially inside the harbour thanks to Mehmed's audacious manoeuvre, launched a series of attacks on the Byzantine navy. The defenders fought valiantly, using fire ships and skilled tactics to hold off the superior Ottoman fleet. But their resources were stretched thin, and each victory came at a high cost. The city's residents faced growing hardships. Food supplies dwindled, forcing strict rationing and leading to widespread hunger. The constant noise of the siege, cannon blasts, the clash of swords, and the cries of battle made restful sleep nearly impossible. And yet, the people endured, drawing strength from their shared purpose and their leaders' unyielding resolve. As May progressed, the city's defenders began to realise that relief from the outside was unlikely. The Venetian and Genoese fleets, though sympathetic to the Byzantine cause, were entangled in their own conflicts and slow to act. Constantinople stood alone against the might of the Ottoman Empire. The stage was set for a climactic confrontation. The city was battered but unbroken, its defenders refusing to yield despite the impossible odds. The Ottomans, frustrated by the slow progress of the siege, prepared for an all-out assault to breach the walls and claim their prize. The air was heavy with tension, every moment pregnant with the possibility of triumph or tragedy. As the final days of the siege approached, one could feel the weight of history bearing down on Constantinople. The city's fate hung in the balance, and the world watched, waiting to see how this epic struggle would end. Yet as the cannon blasts faded into the distance and the days turned into long quiet nights, imagine the peaceful stillness settling over the defenders of the city. The weight of the struggle seemed to lift, replaced by a soft calm that allowed weary eyes to rest, even amidst the constant pressure of the siege. Slowly, the heartbeat of the city began to quiet, like a soft lullaby in the air, gently easing the soul into a place of quiet surrender. As you picture these final moments, let the rhythm of the battle fade into the background, replaced by the peaceful embrace of rest. Feel your breath deepen, your body relax, and your thoughts drift like the gentle breeze over the sea. Sleep now as the city too prepares for the quiet of its inevitable change. On May 29th, 1453, after nearly 2 months of relentless bombardment and siege, Sultan Mehmed II ordered his forces to make their final push. The battered walls of Constantinople, once thought impenetrable, could no longer hold against the might of the Ottoman army. As the sun rose on that fateful morning, the air was thick with tension, and the distant rumble of approaching soldiers could be heard over the stillness of the city. The defenders, though exhausted and outnumbered, had one final opportunity to hold the line. Emperor Constantine XI, fully aware of the gravity of the moment, donned his armour and walked once more among his soldiers. His face, normally calm and composed, now carried the weight of his kingdom's fate. The emperor's rallying cry was simple: freedom or death, and he urged his soldiers to fight for their city and for their lives. Meanwhile, on the Ottoman side, Sultan Mehmed II had prepared for this day with meticulous care. His engineers worked tirelessly to breach the walls using battering rams, and his elite Janissary troops positioned themselves to take the city by force. A final, massive cannon barrage rang out across the city as the Ottomans made their move. With each blast, the walls of Constantinople groaned, and the defenders scrambled to repair what they could, but the damage had taken its toll. At the same time, the Ottoman fleet, now fully in position within the Golden Horn, moved to blockade the last remaining escape routes by sea. Constantinople, once a beacon of power and culture, was now a city trapped. Its streets, filled with the sounds of combat, became narrow avenues of despair and defiance. As the battle raged in the city, the defenders fought valiantly, but it was clear that the odds were stacked against them. The walls were crumbling. The artillery had breached a gap large enough for the Ottoman forces to swarm in. The fighting grew fiercer, house by house, street by street, as the city's residents and soldiers tried to push back the invaders, but there were too many Ottomans, and their determination to conquer the city was overwhelming. As the day wore on, the fate of Constantinople was sealed. By afternoon, the Ottomans had broken through the walls, and the city began to fall. Emperor Constantine XI, realizing that the end was near, fought bravely until the very last. But when the Ottoman forces entered the city, they found no mercy. The city was overrun, and its defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, were either captured or slain. The fall of Constantinople was not just the fall of a city, it was the end of an era. The Byzantine Empire, which had once been a powerful force in Europe and Asia, was no more. The city, now in Ottoman hands, would be renamed Istanbul and become the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. As you reflect on the fall of this great city, imagine the silence that followed the chaos of battle. The cries of the defeated soldiers faded into quiet, and the city, now under new rule, began its transformation. The once grand buildings, the churches, and the bustling marketplaces were left to be reborn into something new. Let the stillness of this moment wash over you, as the world that once was fades away, and a new world takes its place. As you feel the weight of this chapter settle into the quiet of the night, let the sounds of the world outside fade into a soft background hum. Close your eyes and feel the piece of history unfolding, letting the past gently drift away. Sleep now, as time itself slows, and the city's story becomes a part of your dreams. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, reverberating far beyond the walls of the ancient city. As the Ottomans took control, they reshaped not only the city's physical appearance, but also its cultural, political, and religious landscape. The Byzantine Empire, which had once been the protector of Christian Orthodox traditions, was gone. The city of Constantinople, now Istanbul, would become the heart of a new empire, the Ottoman Empire, bringing with it a wave of change that would echo through history for centuries. The fall of Constantinople was a pivotal moment for Europe, signalling the end of the medieval period and the start of the Renaissance. With the loss of one of the most important Christian cities, scholars, artisans, and intellectuals fled to the west, carrying with them priceless knowledge and manuscripts. The Greeks, who had lived under Byzantine rule for generations, brought their learning to places like Florence, Venice, and Rome. the rediscovery of classical texts and ancient Greek philosophy fueled the Renaissance, sparking a new era of intellectual and artistic flourishing. But the impact of the city's fall was not just felt in the West. For the Ottomans, capturing Constantinople was a moment of immense pride and significance. Sultan Mehmed II, now known as the Conqueror, solidified his legacy and the Ottoman Empire's power. He established a new capital that would rival all other cities in the world, renaming it Istanbul, and began transforming it into a thriving metropolis. The Hagia Sophia, once a Christian cathedral and a symbol of Byzantine glory, was converted into a mosque, and the city's skyline would be dominated by the grand minarets of Ottoman mosques. The Ottomans also began to expand their empire, pushing further into Europe, Asia, and Africa. Constantinople's fall opened up new trade routes and positioned the Ottomans as the dominant force in the eastern Mediterranean. The city's strategic location between Europe and Asia gave the Ottomans control of crucial land and sea trade routes, further strengthening their empire. In the centuries that followed, the legacy of Constantinople would continue to shape the world. For the East, it became a symbol of Ottoman strength and prosperity. For the West, it served as a reminder of the fragility of empires and the shifting tides of history. The fall of Constantinople was more than just a military victory. It was a symbolic event that signalled the changing balance of power in the world. As you reflect on the long-reaching consequences of this moment in history, imagine how the passing of centuries can transform a city, how the echoes of one era can reverberate into the next. Feel the calmness of time moving forward, each breath slower as you let the weight of these changes settle into your thoughts. The past is a river, constantly flowing, and Constantinople's fall was but one ripple in the vast current of history. Let this ripple guide you into a peaceful place of reflection, where the weight of time and change lifts, and you feel the peace of quiet understanding. Though the city of Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, the spirit of its ancient civilization would never be fully extinguished. The echoes of its grandeur, its wisdom, and its role as the crossroads of empires resonated through time. The Byzantines, though defeated, had left an indelible mark on the world. The artifacts, the knowledge, and the stories of their culture continued to influence not only the Ottomans, but the entire world for generations. Even the name Constantinople itself would live on in the hearts of those who revered its history. For the Ottomans, the transformation of the city into Istanbul was more than a conquest. It was a blending of two worlds. The Greek Orthodox and Christian heritage of Constantinople mixed with the Islamic Ottoman culture, creating a rich and diverse society that would flourish for centuries. The city's iconic Hagia Sophia, once a Christian church, stood as a testament to this blending, a symbol of the city's enduring beauty and the confluence of different faiths, traditions, and ideas. Over time, Istanbul would become a global hub for art, science, and trade, fostering an environment where diverse cultures and ideas could meet. Scholars, artists, and merchants from all corners of the world passed through the city, contributing to its ongoing legacy as a place of knowledge and exchange. As you reflect on the lasting impact of Constantinople, imagine how the quiet passage of time can allow a city's legacy to endure long after its walls have crumbled. The stories of Constantinople's rise, its cultural riches, and its eventual fall are woven into the fabric of history. And just as the city evolved, so did the stories of the people who lived there, stories that still inspire awe and contemplation today. Now, as the quiet night settles in, let yourself be carried away by the soft waves of time. The distant sounds of the past are now mere whispers in the night, fading into a calm silence. The story of Constantinople, its rise and fall, and its everlasting influence now rests softly in the back of your mind. Allow this story to guide you into a deep and peaceful rest, where the weight of history lifts and only the soothing silence remains. Thank you for joining this journey through time. As the rain softly falls outside, let the peaceful sounds of nature fill the space around you, bringing you into a place of stillness where dreams are gentle and undisturbed. Sleep now, as the past fades softly into the night and a new day awaits. In the early 17th century, a time when Europe was a patchwork of kingdoms, principalities, and religious divides. At the heart of this patchwork lay the Holy Roman Empire, a vast and fragmented realm that stretched across much of Central Europe. For centuries, tensions simmered beneath the surface, as Catholic and Protestant states vied for power, influence, and the right to practice their faith freely. The spark that ignited this long and devastating conflict came in the form of a defiant act in the city of Prague. In 1618, Protestant nobles in Bohemia, angered by perceived restrictions on their religious freedoms under Emperor Ferdinand II, staged a dramatic rebellion. They stormed Prague Castle, seized 2 imperial officials, and hurled them out of a window in an event known as the Defenestration of Prague. Miraculously, the officials survived the fall, but the act was a clear declaration of defiance. This single moment set off a chain reaction, like ripples spreading across a still pond. Ferdinand II, a staunch Catholic, saw the rebellion as a direct challenge to his authority in the Catholic Church. Determined to restore order and Catholic dominance, he mobilized his forces, while Protestant leaders across the empire began rallying their allies in preparation for a larger struggle. What began as a localized conflict in Bohemia quickly escalated into a broader war, drawing in neighboring regions and foreign powers. Protestant princes sought support from allies in Denmark, Sweden, and beyond, while Catholic states turned to Spain and the powerful Habsburg dynasty for aid. The war was no longer just about Bohemia. It had become a contest of religion, politics, and territorial ambition. As the conflict unfolded, it became clear that this was not a war of quick resolutions. The early battles were fierce yet inconclusive, leaving both sides entrenched in their positions and more determined than ever to secure victory. The countryside began to bear the scars of the war. Villages burned, crops were destroyed, and innocent lives were caught in the crossfire. The 30 Years' War was born out of these divisions, and its origins reveal much about the fragile balance of power and belief in Europe at the time. It was a conflict rooted in faith, but also fueled by ambition and fear, a perfect storm that would rage for decades. Take a moment to absorb this beginning, the first ripples of what would become a vast and relentless storm. As we move forward, the intricate web of alliances, battles, and betrayals will unfold. But for now, let the gravity of this moment settle, a reminder of how one act of defiance can echo across history. As the conflict in Bohemia ignited, the deeper fault lines of Europe's religious divide began to widen, casting a shadow over the entire continent. At its core, the 30 Years' War was fueled by the tensions between Catholics and Protestants, a struggle that had simmered since the Reformation in the 16th century. The Peace of Augsburg in 1555 had attempted to create harmony by allowing rulers within the Holy Roman Empire to determine their state's religion, whether Catholic or Lutheran. Yet this fragile peace left many unresolved issues, particularly with the rise of Calvinism, a branch of Protestantism that had not been recognised in the agreement. As Calvinist states gained influence, the Catholic Habsburg rulers viewed them as a threat. Their growing presence felt like a challenge to the established order. When Ferdinand II ascended to the throne of the Holy Roman Empire, he was determined to restore Catholic dominance. His unwavering faith and aggressive policies further inflamed tensions, especially among Protestant states that viewed him as a tyrant bent on crushing their freedoms. Ferdinand's allies in Spain and the papacy provided him with support, reinforcing the Catholic position with resources and manpower. On the other side, the Protestant Union, a coalition of Protestant princes, mobilized to resist Ferdinand's ambitions. They sought aid from Protestant powers beyond the empire, including Denmark, Sweden, and England. These nations saw the conflict not only as a religious struggle, but also as an opportunity to weaken the Habsburgs and expand their own influence. The war spread beyond Bohemia, spilling into regions such as the Palatinate, Saxony, and Bavaria. Each new front brought devastation to towns and villages, as armies marched across the countryside, leaving destruction in their wake. The brutality of the conflict became evident in battles such as the Battle of White Mountain in 1620, a crushing defeat for the Protestants that marked the beginning of Ferdinand's efforts to reassert Catholic control. But despite Catholic victories in the early years, the war refused to subside. Protestant leaders rallied, drawing on the resources and military expertise of their allies. Sweden, under King Gustavus Adolphus, emerged as a formidable force. His disciplined armies breathed new life into the Protestant cause. The balance of power began to shift and the war escalated further. This was no longer a simple struggle between Catholics and Protestants. It became a war of ambition and survival. Smaller states and mercenary armies joined the fray, drawn by promises of plunder and pay. The war became a theatre of chaos, where alliances shifted and even traditional enemies found themselves fighting side by side in pursuit of their goals. As the conflict deepened, it transformed the very nature of warfare. The 30 Years' War was one of the first conflicts where civilian populations suffered as much as, if not more than, the soldiers. Famine, disease, and displacement became common, as entire communities were uprooted or destroyed. The war's religious roots became intertwined with the politics of power, and its escalation revealed the fragility of peace in a divided world. As we move to the next chapter, consider the human cost of these divisions, the lives touched by a conflict that seemed endless, yet always teetered on the edge of resolution. By the late 1620s, the Protestant cause seemed to falter, their forces weakened by defeats and dwindling alliances. But the entry of Sweden into the war, under the leadership of King Gustavus Adolphus, marked a turning point that would reshape the conflict. Gustavus Adolphus was not just a ruler, he was a visionary military leader whose innovations in strategy and tactics would leave a lasting legacy on warfare. Gustavus Adolphus believed deeply in the Protestant cause, but his intervention was also driven by Sweden's strategic interests. The Habsburgs' growing influence threatened Swedish dominance in the Baltic region, making the 30 Years' War a matter of survival and sovereignty for his nation. With the backing of France, which sought to undermine Habsburg power despite being Catholic, Sweden entered the fray in 1630, bringing with it a disciplined and modernized army. The Swedish forces brought a new energy to the Protestant struggle. Gustavus Adolphus introduced revolutionary military tactics, emphasizing mobility, coordination, and the use of combined arms, integrating infantry, cavalry, and artillery into a cohesive fighting force. These methods gave his troops a significant edge over the larger but less organized armies of the Catholic League. The Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631 was a defining moment, a stunning victory for the Swedes and their Protestant allies. Gustavus Adolphus's army decimated the Catholic forces, demonstrating the effectiveness of his strategies. This victory not only bolstered Protestant morale, but also drew new allies to their cause, shifting the balance of power in the war. Under Gustavus Adolphus's leadership, the Protestant forces began to reclaim territory lost in earlier phases of the war. They advanced deep into the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, challenging Ferdinand II's dominance and threatening the stability of the Habsburg realms. Gustavus Adolphus's charisma and tactical brilliance earned him the loyalty of his troops and the respect of his enemies. But his triumphs were not without cost. In 1632, at the Battle of Lutzen, Gustavus Adolphus achieved another critical victory, but lost his life in the process. His death was a severe blow to the Protestant cause, yet his legacy endured. The momentum he had generated allowed Sweden to remain a dominant force in the war, and his military innovations continued to influence the strategies of both sides. As Sweden's intervention reshaped the war, the conflict grew even more complex. Religious divides began to blur as political ambitions took centre stage, with Catholic France supporting Protestant Sweden to counterbalance Habsburg power. This shifting landscape of alliances revealed the deeper currents driving the war, a struggle not just of faith, but of power and control over Europe's future. Gustavus Adolphus's role in the 30 Years' War is a testament to the transformative power of leadership and innovation. His contributions brought hope to a fractured alliance and altered the course of a seemingly endless conflict. Yet, his death also reminded the world of the fleeting nature of triumph in the face of war's relentless toll. As we prepare to move to the next chapter, take a moment to reflect on the determination and vision it takes to bring change amid chaos. In the darkest times, even a single leader can leave an indelible mark, and yet the storm of history moves forward, carrying all in its wake. As the 30 Years' War stretched into its second decade, the conflict expanded beyond its original boundaries, engulfing nearly all of Europe in its relentless grasp. Nations that had once remained on the sidelines found themselves drawn into the fray, whether by alliances, ambitions, or the sheer inevitability of the war's momentum. The entry of France in 1635 marked a dramatic shift. Though a Catholic nation, France allied with Protestant powers like Sweden to counterbalance the Habsburgs' influence. This decision underscored how the war had evolved from a religious conflict into a broader struggle for political dominance in Europe. The stage was set for what would become one of the most destructive periods of the war. As alliances grew ever more complex and battles became increasingly brutal. Across the continent, the toll of the war was staggering. Cities were besieged and burned. Fields were left barren and lifeless, and villages were emptied as civilians fled the advancing armies. Mercenary forces, often poorly paid and motivated by survival, resorted to pillaging and looting, leaving devastation in their wake. Famine and disease swept through war-torn regions, taking more lives than the battles themselves. As you listen to this story, let the gravity of these events drift gently through your thoughts, but not linger. Imagine the chaos of the time slowly fading into the background, replaced by a sense of quiet reflection. Feel the weight of the war's hardship giving way to an understanding of resilience, a reminder of humanity's enduring strength even in its darkest hours. The conflict's scope seemed endless, with battles erupting in regions as far-reaching as the Rhineland, the Netherlands, and northern Italy. Yet amid the turmoil, moments of diplomacy and negotiation emerged, offering brief glimpses of hope. Peace talks began to take shape, though they were slow and fraught with challenges, reflecting the deep divisions and mistrust among the warring parties. Let these moments of negotiation remind you that even in the midst of chaos, there are always efforts toward resolution. Allow yourself to relax further, your breath steady and calm, as if tracing the contours of history's slow march toward peace. As we move deeper into the story, the resilience of the people and the shifting tides of war remind us of the impermanence of struggle. Take this moment to let your mind ease. Let the complexity of the 30 Years' War unravel gently, leaving you with a sense of quiet perspective and peace. After nearly 3 decades of relentless conflict, Europe began to seek an end to the devastation. The 30 Years' War had taken a toll unlike any before it. Economies were ruined, lands were ravaged, and millions of lives had been lost. By the early 1640s, the warring nations realized that no decisive victory was in sight. The war had devolved into a stalemate of exhaustion. Thus began the long and complex journey toward peace through the negotiations that would culminate in the Peace of Westphalia. The Westphalian negotiations were unprecedented in their scope and ambition. For the first time in European history, nearly all major powers gathered to discuss terms of peace. Delegates from Catholic and Protestant states, as well as representatives from France, Sweden, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire, met in the towns of Münster and Osnabrück. These talks would last for years, reflecting the complexity of the issues at hand and the deep mistrust between the parties. As the negotiations unfolded, the participants wrestled with questions of religion, sovereignty, and the balance of power. The Peace of Westphalia sought to establish a new order in Europe, one that would recognize the religious and political realities that had emerged from the war. Protestant and Catholic states agreed to a form of mutual tolerance, reaffirming the principle that rulers could determine their state's religion, while also granting greater freedoms to minority faiths. The treaty also redefined the concept of sovereignty. It marked the beginning of the modern state system, where nations recognised each other's territorial boundaries and agreed not to interfere in one another's internal affairs. This idea of state sovereignty would become a cornerstone of international relations for centuries to come. While the Peace of Westphalia brought an end to the 30 Years' War, its provisions were not without compromise. No side emerged as a clear victor, and many of the underlying tensions remained unresolved. Yet, the treaty succeeded in ending the immediate bloodshed and creating a framework for coexistence in a fractured Europe. As you listen to the conclusion of this chapter, let the idea of resolution fill your thoughts. Picture the weary negotiators, coming together after years of strife, finding common ground in the hope of a better future. Let this image remind you that even in the most challenging times, peace is always within reach. The road to peace was long and arduous, yet it proved that dialogue and compromise can overcome even the deepest divisions. Allow this lesson to settle within you as you relax further, your mind at ease, as the echoes of war fade into the calm promise of resolution. As the Peace of Westphalia brought an end to the 30 Years' War, Europe began to rebuild from the ashes of its most devastating conflict. The war left an indelible mark on the continent, shaping the course of history in profound ways. Nations that had been battered and broken emerged with new identities, while the concept of sovereignty laid the foundation for the modern nation-state system. The war's legacy extended beyond politics and borders. It changed the way conflicts were waged, highlighting the immense cost of prolonged war and the devastating impact on civilian populations. The lessons of the 30 Years' War echoed across generations, reminding humanity of the importance of diplomacy, tolerance, and restraint. This story of destruction and eventual reconciliation carries a timeless message. Even in the darkest of times, there is always a path forward, a path forged through perseverance, negotiation, and the willingness to find common ground. The 30 Years' War may have scarred Europe, but it also served as a turning point, proving that peace, though hard won, is always worth striving for. As we close this chapter of history, take a moment to reflect on the resilience of the human spirit. Let the story of the 30 Years' War remind you of the strength found in unity and the power of resolution. Think of the nations and individuals who rebuilt after so much loss, their journey, though difficult, leading to a more stable and interconnected future. Now let the soothing sounds of rain guide you to a place of peace and relaxation. Imagine gentle raindrops falling softly on leaves, washing away the echoes of history's struggles. Feel the rhythm of the rain bringing calm to your mind and a sense of quiet to your soul. The story of Omaha Beach begins with the broader context of World War II, a conflict that had engulfed the globe by the early 1940s. After the fall of France to Nazi Germany in 1940, much of Western Europe lay under German occupation. Britain stood alone as the last bastion of resistance in Western Europe, facing the might of the German Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain and enduring relentless bombing during the Blitz. Despite these challenges, Britain, under the leadership of Winston Churchill, refused to capitulate. Across the Atlantic, the United States had initially maintained a policy of neutrality, focusing on domestic recovery from the Great Depression. However, the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 brought the United States into the war, joining the Allies in their struggle against the Axis powers. The United States, with its vast industrial capacity and manpower, became a crucial partner in the fight to liberate Europe. By 1942, the Allies faced the daunting task of planning a full-scale invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. This effort, known as Operation Overlord, aimed to establish a foothold in France, opening a western front to relieve pressure on the Soviet Union, which was bearing the brunt of the fighting on the Eastern Front. The operation would require meticulous planning, vast resources, and extraordinary bravery. The invasion was scheduled for June 1944 and would take place along a 50-mile stretch of coastline in Normandy, France. The beaches were divided into 5 sectors: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Each sector had its own challenges, but Omaha Beach, assigned to American forces, was considered one of the most heavily defended and treacherous. The Germans, anticipating an Allied invasion, had fortified the French coastline with a series of defensive structures known as the Atlantic Wall. This formidable barrier included concrete bunkers, artillery emplacements, barbed wire, minefields, and anti-tank obstacles. Omaha Beach, with its high bluffs overlooking the shoreline, offered a natural defensive advantage to the German forces. The beach was defended by the 352nd Infantry Division, a well-trained and battle-hardened unit. The Allies knew that success at Omaha Beach would be crucial to the overall success of Operation Overlord. The beach provided a direct route inland to key roads and towns, making it essential for securing the Normandy region. Failure to take Omaha Beach could jeopardize the entire invasion and prolong the war. On the night of June 5, 1944, a massive Allied armada gathered off the coast of Normandy. Over 5,000 ships carrying troops, vehicles and supplies prepared to launch the largest amphibious invasion in history. The force included American, British, Canadian and other Allied troops, all united in their mission to liberate Europe from Nazi tyranny. As dawn broke on June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, the invasion began. The assault on Omaha Beach involved 2 American divisions, the 1st Infantry Division, known as the Big Red One, and the 29th Infantry Division. These soldiers, many of them young and inexperienced, faced a harrowing task. The first waves of troops landed at Omaha Beach under intense enemy fire. The Germans, positioned in fortified bunkers and machine gun nests, rained bullets and artillery shells on the landing craft and soldiers. Many of the landing craft were destroyed before they reached the shore, and those who made it to the beach faced a deadly gauntlet of obstacles and firepower. The terrain at Omaha Beach added to the challenges. The wide open beach provided little cover, and the high bluffs allowed German forces to fire down on the exposed American troops. The rising tide threatened to engulf the soldiers and their equipment, adding another layer of urgency to the battle. Despite these overwhelming odds, the American soldiers displayed extraordinary bravery and determination. Small groups of men began to push forward, finding gaps in the German defences and scaling the bluffs. Engineers worked tirelessly to clear obstacles and minefields, enabling reinforcements to reach the beach. By mid-morning, the tide of the battle began to turn. Reinforcements from subsequent waves brought additional manpower and firepower to the fight. Naval bombardments and airstrikes targeted German positions, weakening their defences. Slowly but steadily, the Americans gained ground, overcoming the formidable obstacles and breaking through the Atlantic Wall. By the end of the day, the American forces had secured a foothold at Omaha Beach, but the cost was staggering. Over 2,000 American soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing, making Omaha Beach the bloodiest of the 5 D-Day beaches. The sacrifices of these men were not in vain, as their efforts paved the way for the liberation of Normandy and, ultimately, the defeat of Nazi Germany. The success at Omaha Beach and the broader D-Day invasion marked a turning point in World War II. The Allies established a strong presence in Normandy, which allowed them to launch further offensives into France and beyond. Within weeks, Paris was liberated, and the momentum of the war shifted decisively in favour of the Allies. The Battle of Omaha Beach is remembered as a testament to the courage and resilience of those who fought and sacrificed for freedom. The stories of individual heroism and collective determination continue to inspire generations. reminding us of the cost of war and the enduring value of liberty. Today, the beaches of Normandy are peaceful, their sands washed clean by the tides of time. Memorials and cemeteries stand as solemn reminders of the events of June 6, 1944, honouring the men who gave their lives in the name of freedom. The legacy of Omaha Beach lives on, a symbol of unity, sacrifice, and the indomitable human spirit. As you reflect on this story, imagine the quiet shores of Normandy under a starlit sky, the waves gently lapping at the sands that once bore witness to such bravery. Let the memory of those who fought and fell remind you of the strength and resilience within us all. As the day of June 6, 1944, unfolded at Omaha Beach, the battle continued with relentless intensity. The early waves of American troops had endured devastating losses. Many soldiers never even made it off their landing craft, while others were cut down as they stepped onto the beach. The chaos and carnage of those first hours were overwhelming, with confusion reigning among the survivors as they sought to find cover and organise. The German defenders, positioned in fortified bunkers and pillboxes, maintained a near-constant stream of fire. Machine guns swept the open sands, mortars exploded among the soldiers, and artillery from the high bluffs pounded the beachhead. These fortifications had been meticulously planned, with interlocking fields of fire and overlapping lines of defence, making it nearly impossible for large groups of soldiers to advance without suffering heavy casualties. The Americans faced logistical challenges as well. Many of the tanks and heavy equipment intended to support the landing were lost at sea due to rough waters and enemy fire. The soldiers were left with little more than their rifles, grenades, and sheer determination to overcome the formidable obstacles ahead. The landing beach itself was littered with debris, destroyed landing craft, abandoned equipment, and the bodies of fallen comrades, creating a scene of utter devastation. Yet, amidst this chaos, small pockets of resistance began to form. Groups of soldiers, often led by junior officers or non-commissioned officers, rallied together and started pushing forward. These men displayed extraordinary courage, braving machine gun fire and mortar shells to advance toward the German positions. Engineers worked tirelessly to clear paths through the beach obstacles, blowing gaps in the barbed wire and clearing mines under heavy fire. One of the pivotal moments of the battle came when soldiers began scaling the bluffs that loomed over the beach. Using ropes, ladders, and sheer grit, they climbed the steep slopes to reach the German positions at the top. The fighting here was brutal and close quarters, with soldiers engaging the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. Slowly but surely, the Americans began to neutralize the German bunkers and gun emplacements, thus weakening the enemy's defensive hold on the beach. The turning point at Omaha Beach was also aided by naval support. Realizing the dire situation on the beach, American naval commanders ordered their ships to move closer to shore, despite the risk of running aground. From these positions, the ships unleashed a barrage of firepower, targeting the German fortifications with their heavy guns. These naval bombardments played a crucial role in suppressing the enemy defences, allowing the soldiers on the ground to advance. By the afternoon, the tide of the battle had shifted. Reinforcements from later waves brought fresh troops and supplies to the beach, bolstering the American effort. The German defenders, though still fighting fiercely, began to falter under the relentless pressure. The combination of infantry assaults, naval bombardments, and air support gradually broke the German lines. By nightfall, the Americans had established a tenuous foothold at Omaha Beach. The high bluffs, once a symbol of the German dominance, were now under American control. From this vantage point, the troops could push inland, linking up with forces from the other landing beaches and beginning the liberation of Normandy. The cost of victory at Omaha Beach was staggering. Over 2,000 American soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing, making it one of the bloodiest battles of D-Day. The courage and sacrifice of these men, however, paved the way for the success of the entire invasion. Their actions ensured that the Allies could establish a strong presence in Normandy, a crucial step toward defeating Nazi Germany. In the days that followed, the Americans worked to consolidate their position at Omaha Beach. Supply lines were established, reinforcements poured in, and the beachhead became a staging ground for further operations. The success of D-Day marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, as Allied forces pushed inland and liberated towns and cities across France. The Battle of Omaha Beach remains one of the most iconic and studied engagements of World War II. It exemplifies the extraordinary bravery, determination, and resilience of the soldiers who fought there. Their sacrifices remind us of the cost of freedom and the enduring power of unity in the face of adversity. Today, Omaha Beach is a place of reflection and remembrance. The sands that once bore witness to such intense combat are now quiet, visited by people from around the world who come to pay their respects. The Normandy American Cemetery, overlooking the beach, stands as a solemn tribute to the thousands of soldiers who gave their lives on D-Day. As you think about the events of Omaha Beach, imagine the courage it took for those soldiers to face such overwhelming odds. Picture the determination of the men scaling the bluffs, the resolve of the engineers clearing obstacles, and the bravery of the naval crews providing support. Let their sacrifices fill you with a sense of gratitude and inspiration. The story of Omaha Beach is not just one of extraordinary bravery and resilience. It is also a tale of lessons learned and strategies developed that would influence the remainder of World War II. The success of D-Day, including the hard-fought victory at Omaha Beach, gave the Allies a critical foothold in Western Europe, but it also came with a significant cost, offering lessons in leadership, logistics, and the nature of modern warfare. In the days and weeks following June 6, 1944, the Allies worked tirelessly to solidify their positions in Normandy. Omaha Beach, alongside the other 4 landing beaches, became a vital supply hub for the Allied forces. Engineers constructed artificial harbours, known as mulberry harbours, to facilitate the unloading of troops, vehicles and supplies. These floating piers were a marvel of engineering and a testament to the ingenuity and determination of the Allied effort. With the beachhead secured, the Allies pushed inland, encountering fierce resistance from German forces. The bocage, the dense hedgerows that characterised the Normandy countryside, proved to be a significant obstacle, offering German defenders natural cover and making it difficult for Allied tanks and infantry to advance. Despite these challenges, the Allies pressed forward, liberating towns and villages one by one. Omaha Beach's role in the larger Normandy campaign cannot be overstated. It served as a crucial link between the various sectors of the invasion, allowing the Allies to coordinate their movements and reinforce their lines. The capture of Omaha Beach also enabled the Allies to connect with the airborne divisions that had landed further inland, creating a unified front that could push the Germans back. The success of the Normandy campaign eventually led to the liberation of Paris in August 1944. The victory at Omaha Beach and the other landing sites had set the stage for this momentous achievement, giving the Allies the momentum they needed to continue their advance across France and into Germany. By opening a western front, the Allies forced the Germans to fight on multiple fronts, stretching their resources and hastening the collapse of the Nazi regime. For the soldiers who fought at Omaha Beach, the experience left an indelible mark. Many of the survivors carried the memories of that harrowing day for the rest of their lives. Their stories, filled with moments of terror, heroism, and camaraderie, provide invaluable insights into the human cost of war. These first-hand accounts have been passed down through generations, ensuring that the sacrifices made on that stretch of sand are never forgotten. The legacy of Omaha Beach extends beyond the battlefield. It serves as a reminder of the importance of unity and collaboration in overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. The D-Day invasion was a joint effort involving not just American forces but also British, Canadian and other Allied troops, Their collective determination and shared purpose exemplify the power of working together for a common goal. In the years following World War II, Omaha Beach became a symbol of remembrance and reconciliation. Memorials and cemeteries were established to honour the fallen, and annual commemorations bring together veterans, their families, and people from around the world to reflect on the events of June 6, 1944. The beach itself, now peaceful and serene, offers a stark contrast to the chaos and violence of that day, serving as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made for freedom. The Battle of Omaha Beach also holds important lessons for future generations. It underscores the importance of preparation, adaptability, and resolve in the face of adversity. The soldiers who fought there demonstrated extraordinary courage, refusing to give up despite overwhelming odds. Their example inspires us to persevere through challenges and to value the freedoms and opportunities that others have fought to secure. As you reflect on the story of Omaha Beach, imagine the waves gently lapping against the shore, the sands now quiet and still. Think of the soldiers who stepped onto that beach, knowing the dangers that awaited them, yet pressing forward with unwavering determination. Let their bravery and sacrifice remind you of the strength and resilience within us all. The legacy of Omaha Beach continues to resonate far beyond the shores of Normandy. It stands as a testament to the bravery and sacrifice of those who fought, and as a reminder of the profound impact of collective action in the pursuit of freedom. While the battle itself ended on June 6, 1944, its implications echoed throughout the remainder of the war and the decades that followed. In the immediate aftermath of the D-Day invasion, the Allies faced the monumental task of consolidating their gains and pushing further into German-occupied territory. The soldiers at Omaha Beach were soon joined by reinforcements, swelling the ranks and ensuring that the beachhead could serve as a staging ground for subsequent offensives. Supplies poured in through makeshift ports and logistical hubs, enabling the Allied forces to maintain their momentum. The capture of Omaha Beach, alongside the other landing sites, directly contributed to the liberation of Normandy. The fighting that followed was grueling, with both sides suffering heavy losses as they contested every inch of ground. The hedgerows of the bocage proved to be as challenging as the bluffs of Omaha Beach, with their dense vegetation providing ample cover for German defenders. Despite this, the Allies persevered, employing innovative tactics and overwhelming firepower to overcome the obstacles. One of the critical outcomes of the battle was the establishment of a Western Front. This forced Germany to split its resources, fighting the Allies in the west while continuing to battle the Soviet Union in the east. The strain of this two-front war proved too much for the Nazi regime, hastening its eventual collapse. The victory at Omaha Beach also had a profound psychological impact. For the Allied forces, it was a demonstration of their ability to achieve what many had thought impossible. The success of the invasion bolstered morale and provided a sense of hope for a future free from tyranny. For the German forces, it marked the beginning of the end, as the once impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached, and the tide of the war was turning decisively against them. As the Allies advanced across France, the significance of Omaha Beach became even more apparent. It was not just a battle, but a gateway, an entry point for liberation. Towns and cities that had suffered under German occupation were freed, and the French people began to rebuild their lives. By August 1944, Paris was liberated, a moment that symbolized the triumph of the Allied cause and the resilience of the human spirit. In the broader context of World War II, Omaha Beach serves as a reminder of the high stakes and immense sacrifices involved in the fight against fascism. The lessons learned there informed Allied strategy in subsequent campaigns, from the push into Germany to the eventual victory in Europe in May 1945. The story of Omaha Beach has also left an indelible mark on culture and memory. Films, books and documentaries have brought the events of D-Day to life for new generations, ensuring that the bravery and sacrifices of those who fought are never forgotten. Veterans who survived the battle have shared their stories, offering invaluable insights into the human experience of war. For those who visit Normandy today, Omaha Beach is a place of reflection and reverence. The rows of white crosses at the Normandy American Cemetery stand as a poignant reminder of the lives lost. The monuments and museums tell the story of the battle, preserving its legacy for future generations. Walking along the beach, one can still see remnants of the landing, from scattered artifacts to the rusted remains of bunkers and defences. The impact of Omaha Beach extends beyond the battlefield. It reminds us of the power of unity, the importance of standing up against injustice, and the strength that comes from working together toward a common goal. It also serves as a cautionary tale, urging us to remember the cost of war and the value of peace. As we close this chapter of history, take a moment to reflect on the bravery of those who fought at Omaha Beach. Imagine the waves gently washing over the sands, erasing the scars of battle, but never the memory of what took place there. Let their sacrifices inspire you to cherish the freedoms we enjoy today, and to strive for a future where such sacrifices are no longer necessary. Its roots lie in the escalating tensions between the United States and Japan. In the early 20th century, Japan emerged as a dominant power in East Asia. Through rapid industrialization and military expansion, it asserted its influence. By the 1930s, Japan's imperial ambitions clashed with the interests of Western powers. Among these, the United States sought to maintain its influence in the Pacific. In 1937, Japan's invasion of China began its aggressive campaign for territorial control. This conflict brought atrocities, including the infamous Nanking Massacre. The international community condemned Japan's actions. In response, the United States imposed economic sanctions. Vital resources like oil and steel were cut off. For Japan, these sanctions were crippling. Its military and industrial capabilities were under threat. The Japanese government saw the sanctions as an existential crisis, and so they began to prepare for war. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. This devastating strike crippled the US Pacific Fleet in Hawaii. The goal? Eliminate American naval power in the Pacific. This would give Japan free rein to expand its empire. While the attack dealt a significant blow, it galvanized the United States. Within days, America declared war on Japan. This marked the nation's full entry into World War II. After Pearl Harbor, Japan's military advanced rapidly. Territories like the Philippines, Singapore, and parts of Indonesia fell to their forces. The Japanese seemed unstoppable, dominating the Pacific with unrelenting campaigns. But in May 1942, cracks began to show. The Battle of the Coral Sea became a turning point. This costly engagement marked the first time Japan's expansion was checked. The United States stopped Japan from capturing Port Moresby in New Guinea. This preserved a critical Allied position. Despite this setback, Japan remained confident. Its military leaders, particularly Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, planned a decisive battle. Yamamoto's strategy was ambitious. He aimed to lure the US fleet into a trap by attacking Midway Atoll. Midway was remote but strategically vital. Its proximity to Hawaii made it a key target. If captured, Midway would allow Japan to extend its defensive perimeter. It might even threaten the American mainland. Unbeknownst to the Japanese, the United States had a crucial advantage. American cryptographers, led by Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort, had broken Japan's naval codes. Through intercepted communications, US intelligence uncovered the plan. The attack on Midway, codenamed Operation MI, was no longer a secret. Armed with this knowledge, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz took action. As commander of the US Pacific Fleet, he devised a bold counter-strategy. Rather than falling into Yamamoto's trap, Nimitz planned to ambush the Japanese fleet. In preparation, Nimitz assembled his forces, The US Navy had 3 carriers available: USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown. The Yorktown, damaged during the Battle of the Coral Sea, was a critical piece. Repaired in record time, it returned to action just in time for the fight. These carriers, along with their escorts and aircraft, represented America's best hope. This was their chance to turn the tide in the Pacific. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, the battle began. Japanese aircraft launched waves of attacks on Midway Atoll. Bombs rained down, targeting airstrips and defences. The defenders, though heavily outnumbered, fought valiantly. Anti-aircraft fire and fighter planes took a toll on the attackers, yet Midway suffered significant damage. Even so, the Japanese failed to achieve their primary goal, neutralising Midway's air power. As the Japanese prepared for a second wave, the Americans struck back. Carrier-based aircraft launched a bold counterattack. The first waves of US torpedo bombers faced devastating losses. Their slow, outdated planes were no match for the agile Japanese Zero fighters. Many brave crews were lost, but their sacrifice distracted the Japanese defences. This left the enemy fleet vulnerable. At a critical moment, American dive bombers arrived. They found the Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, completely exposed. The ships were refueling and rearming planes. Their decks were crowded with explosives. The American bombers struck with devastating precision. Direct hits ignited explosions and fires. Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were consumed by flames. This was a catastrophic blow to Japan's naval power. The 4th Japanese carrier, Hiryu, launched a counterstrike. It managed to severely damage the USS Yorktown, but the Americans regrouped quickly. They launched a final attack, sinking Hiryu by the end of the day. All 4 Japanese carriers were destroyed. This marked a turning point, not just in the battle, but in the war itself. The fighting continued for several days. The Japanese attempted to regroup and retreat. By June 7th, it was over. The United States had achieved a decisive victory. Japan's primary carriers were sunk. Their ability to project power in the Pacific was crippled. The loss was catastrophic for Japan. Over 3,000 sailors and airmen were killed. Their fleet suffered irreparable damage. The Battle of Midway marked a turning point. Japan, once seemingly invincible, was now on the defensive. The United States began a bold campaign of island hopping. Strategic locations were captured one by one. Step by step, they pushed closer to Japan. Midway reshaped the nature of naval warfare. The battle proved the central role of aircraft carriers. It signaled the end of the battleship era. Beyond its strategic significance, Midway is remembered for its human cost. The courage of American pilots was extraordinary. They faced overwhelming odds with determination. The resilience of sailors aboard the Yorktown and other ships was inspiring. Their sacrifices showed the strength of the human spirit, even in the face of adversity. Today, Midway Atoll is a wildlife refuge. Its calm waters and quiet shores stand in contrast to the chaos it once endured. This peaceful place is a testament to those sacrifices. It reminds us of the price paid for peace. The story of Midway teaches us many things: the power of strategy, the importance of intelligence, and the unity needed to overcome the greatest challenges. As you rest tonight, reflect on this story. Picture the vast Pacific Ocean. Imagine its waves, now peaceful and still. Think of the bravery of those who fought for a brighter future. Let their sacrifices bring you calm and hope. The impact of Midway did not end with the sinking of Japan's carriers. Its effects echoed across the Pacific and beyond. For Japan, the loss was a strategic disaster. 4 carriers were destroyed: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. These ships were the core of the Imperial Japanese Navy's striking force. Their destruction ended Japan's ability to conduct large-scale offensives. The loss of experienced pilots and aircrew was another blow. Unlike the United States, Japan struggled to replace its forces. Its industrial capacity and training programs were limited. The expertise of the aviators lost at Midway was irreplaceable. This left the Japanese fleet at a growing disadvantage in later battles. For the United States, Midway was a game changer. Victory allowed the US to shift from defense to offense. The Pacific, once dominated by Japan, began to change. American morale soared. The victory proved Japan's expansion could be halted and reversed. For the first time, the Allies had a clear path forward. The island-hopping strategy followed soon after. Allied forces targeted key Japanese-held islands. They bypassed heavily fortified positions, choosing strategic locations instead. Each island captured brought the Allies closer to Japan's home islands. Japanese supply lines were cut off, isolating their forces. One of the first campaigns to build on Midway's success was the Battle for Guadalcanal, which began in August 1942. This grueling 6-month campaign saw the United States gain its first major foothold in the Pacific. It marked the beginning of Japan's long retreat. The lessons learned at Midway, particularly the importance of air superiority in carrier-based operations, were applied repeatedly in the battles that followed. The psychological impact of Midway was equally profound. For Japan, the defeat shattered the aura of invincibility that had surrounded its navy. The loss of the carriers that had spearheaded the attack on Pearl Harbor was a blow. It was a blow not only to Japan's military capabilities, but also to its national pride. The morale of Japanese troops and citizens began to waver. The realization set in, victory might not be achievable. For the United States and its allies, Midway was a source of inspiration and determination. The victory demonstrated that careful planning, intelligence, and courage could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. It strengthened the resolve of Allied forces and galvanized the American public, who now saw a path to ultimate victory in the Pacific. The Battle of Midway also highlighted the evolving nature of naval warfare. The era of the battleship, long considered the dominant force in naval strategy, was over. Midway confirmed that aircraft carriers and their air groups were the new kings of the sea. Control of the skies became the determining factor in naval engagements. This shift would influence military doctrine for decades to come. The role of intelligence in the battle cannot be overstated. The work of American codebreakers, who deciphered Japan's naval plans, provided a critical advantage. This allowed the United States to prepare and execute its ambush. This achievement underscored the importance of information and communication in modern warfare. It set the stage for the development of sophisticated intelligence operations in future conflicts. As the war progressed, the impact of Midway became increasingly evident. The Japanese Navy, once a dominant force, found itself unable to mount large-scale operations. Meanwhile, the United States, with its unmatched industrial capacity, continued to build and deploy new carriers, planes, and ships. By 1944, the balance of power in the Pacific had shifted decisively in favor of the Allies. Today, the story of Midway is remembered not just as a battle. It is a testament to the resilience, ingenuity, and bravery of those who fought there. It serves as a reminder of the sacrifices made by the greatest generation, and the lessons of courage, strategy, and unity that shaped the outcome of the war. The site of the battle, Midway Atoll, is now a place of peace and reflection. Designated as a national wildlife refuge, it is home to a rich diversity of marine and bird life. A far cry from the chaos of war that once engulfed its waters, the atoll stands as a symbol of renewal and a tribute to the resilience of nature and humanity alike. As you reflect on the events of the Battle of Midway, imagine the vast, quiet expanse of the Pacific, its waters calm and still under a starry sky. Let the courage and determination of those who fought fill you with a sense of gratitude and inspiration. Their sacrifices remind us of the strength and resilience within each of us and the enduring hope for peace. After the decisive American victory at Midway, the Imperial Japanese Navy found itself in a precarious position. With the loss of 4 carriers, over 300 aircraft and their experienced crews, Japan's ability to project power across the Pacific was irreparably weakened. The battle also exposed critical flaws in Japan's strategic planning and overconfidence. Despite early successes in the war, the Japanese High Command underestimated the United States' industrial capacity, intelligence capabilities, and the sheer determination of its forces. Midway was a psychological blow to Japan. The once dominant Japanese Navy now faced a growing and increasingly confident American fleet. This loss of momentum had a cascading effect on Japanese strategy. Without the naval supremacy they had relied upon, Japan was forced into a defensive posture, scrambling to protect its remaining territories and resources. Meanwhile, the United States capitalized on its victory to push forward with its island-hopping campaign. This strategy involved bypassing heavily fortified Japanese strongholds in favor of capturing strategically significant islands. Each island seized became a stepping stone toward Japan itself, providing bases for air operations, supply lines, and staging areas for future assaults. One of the first major campaigns following Midway was the Battle for Guadalcanal, which began in August 1942. Guadalcanal was a grueling and protracted campaign, lasting 6 months and testing the endurance of both American and Japanese forces. The lessons learned at Midway played a crucial role in this battle, particularly the importance of air superiority and naval coordination. Guadalcanal marked the first significant offensive by Allied forces in the Pacific and further demonstrated Japan's inability to sustain its initial advances. The importance of logistics and industrial capacity, highlighted by Midway, became even more apparent as the war progressed. The United States, with its vast industrial resources, was able to replace ships, aircraft, and personnel at a pace that Japan could not match. For every carrier Japan lost at Midway, the US was building multiple new carriers, along with the planes and crews needed to operate them. This overwhelming production capacity allowed the Allies to maintain pressure on Japan across multiple fronts. The Battle of Midway also influenced the development of naval warfare tactics and technology. The battle demonstrated the importance of aircraft carriers as the centerpiece of naval strategy, relegating battleships to a secondary role. The lessons learned at Midway shaped the way future naval engagements were fought, with an emphasis on air power, intelligence, and mobility. Intelligence gathering, which had played such a pivotal role at Midway, continued to be a critical factor in the Allied war effort. The success of American cryptographers in breaking Japanese codes allowed the US to anticipate and counter Japanese moves throughout the war. This advantage helped secure victories in battles such as the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf, further eroding Japan's ability to wage war. As the war drew closer to Japan's home islands, the effects of Midway became even more pronounced. The loss of carriers and pilots at Midway created a gap in Japan's naval and air capabilities that it could never fully close. By the time of the Battle of the Philippine Sea in 1944, often referred to as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Japanese pilots were so inexperienced that American forces decimated them with relative ease. This imbalance in skill and resources can be traced back to the setbacks Japan suffered at Midway. The legacy of Midway extends beyond its military and strategic implications. It became a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and the importance of unity in the face of adversity. For the United States, the victory at Midway represented a turning point in a war that had begun with the devastating losses at Pearl Harbor. It demonstrated that the American spirit, coupled with innovation and strategy, could overcome even the most formidable challenges. The men who fought at Midway left a lasting impact on history. Their courage and sacrifice are remembered not just in the annals of military history, but also in the hearts of those who understand the profound cost of war. Many of the pilots, sailors, and officers who served in the battle went on to play key roles in subsequent campaigns, carrying with them the lessons and experiences of Midway. Today, the site of the battle remains a place of quiet reflection. Midway Atoll, now a national wildlife refuge, is home to diverse marine and bird life, a stark contrast to the chaos that once engulfed its waters. The peaceful serenity of the atoll serves as a poignant reminder of the cost of war and the enduring hope for peace. The story of Midway is one of triumph and tragedy, of strategy and sacrifice. It is a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, let us remember the bravery of those who fought, the lessons they taught us, and the enduring legacy of their actions. Picture the calm waters of the Pacific, the waves gently lapping against the shores of the atoll. Imagine the bravery of those who took to the skies and seas, their sacrifices shaping the course of history. Let their legacy remind you of the strength and resilience within us all. Thank you for joining us tonight on History and Sleep. May the story of the Battle of Midway bring you reflection, perspective, and a deep sense of gratitude. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the quiet strength of those who came before us, and the enduring hope for a better world. Sweet dreams, and drift off to sleep with rain. Have you ever wondered what truly led to this conflict? What sparked such profound divisions? And how did the people who lived through it endure the hardship and uncertainty? If you're curious, or simply looking for a peaceful story to accompany your evening, stay with me. Together we'll gently unravel the roots of the Civil War, reflect on its major events, and explore the enduring lessons it offers us today. Now let's ease into the story, take a deep breath, get cozy, and let's begin the tale of the American Civil War, a story of division, courage, and the hope for a better tomorrow. The American Civil War didn't happen overnight. It was the result of tensions that had been building for decades. Tensions rooted in profound differences between the North and South. At the heart of it all was the issue of slavery. In the South, slavery wasn't just an institution, it was their economy. Cotton fields stretched as far as the eye could see, and the labour of enslaved people made the South incredibly wealthy. But it came at an unbearable cost, the humanity of millions denied, their voices silenced. In the North, things were changing. The Industrial Revolution was taking hold, and with it came growing calls to abolish slavery. People were starting to speak out more, questioning how a nation built on the idea of liberty could allow such a system to exist. This wasn't just a difference of opinion, it was a clash of values, one that only grew louder as time went on. Then there was the question of states' rights. Southern leaders believed they had the right to govern themselves without interference, especially when it came to slavery. They feared that the federal government, growing stronger by the year, would strip them of their autonomy. On the other side, many in the North believed that a united country required a strong central government, one that could uphold the principles of freedom and equality. The country tried to hold itself together through compromise. The Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, these were like bandages on a wound that just wouldn't heal. Each new agreement seemed to deepen the mistrust between the North and South. By the 1850s, things were nearing a breaking point. Laws like the Fugitive Slave Act demanded that even people in free states help capture runaway slaves, and that outraged abolitionists. Books like Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin brought the horrors of slavery to light, stirring emotions on both sides. Then came politics. The Republican Party was formed, with a platform that directly opposed the expansion of slavery. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860, it was the final straw for the South. His victory wasn't just a political loss, it felt like a direct threat to their way of life. Southern states began to secede from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America, and just like that, the country reached its breaking point. The differences that had been simmering for so long finally boiled over, leading to a conflict that would redefine what it meant to be an American. As you think about these divisions, take a deep breath. Picture the people living through this time, the fear, the hope, the uncertainty. Let the weight of their struggles soften as you relax. knowing that history is full of lessons about resilience, progress, and the power of moving forward. By the spring of 1861, the tensions that had been tearing the nation apart finally reached a boiling point. In Charleston, South Carolina, a small Union garrison stationed at Fort Sumter found itself surrounded by Confederate forces. The fort had become a symbol of defiance for the Union and a test of legitimacy for the Confederacy. Both sides knew that what happened there could set the tone for what was to come. After weeks of tense standoff, Confederate forces under the command of General P.G.T. Beauregard demanded that the Union troops surrender the fort. When Major Robert Anderson, the Union commander, refused, the Confederate forces opened fire on April 12, 1861. For 34 hours the cannons roared, lighting up the harbour with fiery streaks and deafening booms. The soldiers inside Fort Sumter endured the bombardment as best they could, but with no reinforcements and supplies dwindling, Major Anderson had no choice but to surrender. The fall of Fort Sumter was more than just the opening act of the Civil War. It was a spark that ignited the passions of both the North and South. News of the attack spread like wildfire, stirring anger and determination on both sides. In the North, President Abraham Lincoln issued a call for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. The response was overwhelming, with men from towns and cities across the Union stepping forward, ready to fight for the preservation of the nation. In the South, the bombardment of Fort Sumter was seen as a declaration of independence. More states, including Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, joined the Confederacy. The divide was now complete, the lines drawn between two very different visions of America. The early days of the war were marked by a sense of optimism on both sides. Many believed the conflict would be brief, with one decisive battle bringing it to an end. Young men marched off to war with confidence, their families cheering them on with flags and songs. But beneath the surface, the reality of what was to come was far graver than anyone could imagine. As you think about the beginnings of this war, allow your mind to soften its grip on the tension. Picture the soldiers standing on the shores of Charleston Harbour, their breaths visible in the cool dawn air, their thoughts uncertain but resolute. Imagine the cannon fire fading into silence, replaced by the gentle rhythm of waves lapping against the shore. Let this moment remind you that even in the face of division, hope and resolve can endure. As the war moved from the hopeful marches of its early days to the grim reality of prolonged conflict, the battles became larger, bloodier, and more devastating than anyone could have imagined. Names like Antietam, Gettysburg, and Vicksburg became etched into the collective memory of a nation forever changed by the horrors of war. In September 1862, the Battle of Antietam unfolded in Maryland. It was a single day of unimaginable carnage. Soldiers clashed in cornfields and along winding roads, with cannon fire and musket shots tearing through the air. By the end of the day, more than 22,000 men were dead, wounded, or missing. The ground was soaked with blood, and the scale of the losses left an indelible mark on those who survived. But out of this tragedy came a turning point. President Lincoln used the Union's strategic victory at Antietam to announce the Emancipation Proclamation, redefining the war as a fight not just to preserve the Union but to end slavery. Then came Gettysburg, the battle often seen as the turning point of the war. For 3 days in July 1863, Union and Confederate forces clashed in the rolling hills and fields of Pennsylvania. The stakes were enormous and the fighting relentless. On the third day, Confederate General Robert E. Lee ordered a bold assault known as Pickett's Charge. Thousands of Confederate soldiers marched across an open field under withering Union fire. The charge failed, leaving the Confederate army battered and retreating. Gettysburg marked the beginning of the end for the Confederacy, but the cost was staggering. More than 50,000 casualties in just 3 days. Further south, the Union Army achieved another critical victory at Vicksburg, Mississippi, securing control of the Mississippi River. The campaign was grueling, with soldiers enduring sweltering heat, constant skirmishes, and the hardships of siege warfare. When Vicksburg fell on July 4th, 1863, the Confederacy was effectively split in two, a devastating blow to their cause. These battles revealed the full weight of the Civil War, not just in numbers but in the profound human cost. Families mourned the loss of fathers, brothers and sons. Soldiers bore the scars of battle, both physical and emotional. The countryside was littered with the remnants of war, broken cannons, torn flags, and fields that once grew crops now filled with unmarked graves. As you reflect on these moments, let your thoughts rest lightly on the courage of those who lived through these battles. Picture the quiet after the storm, the fields growing still, the sun setting over the hills, and the long shadows stretching across the land. Let this image of stillness and resilience bring a sense of calm to your own thoughts, reminding you that even in the darkest times, there is always a path to healing. While the Civil War raged on the battlefields, the lives of those who remained at home were transformed in ways that were just as profound. Families were torn apart, communities reshaped, and everyday life became a constant balancing act between hope and hardship. In the North, industry boomed as factories shifted their focus to produce weapons, uniforms, and supplies for the Union Army. Women took on roles they had never imagined, working in factories, managing farms, and volunteering as nurses. Clara Barton, who would later found the American Red Cross, became a symbol of this era, tirelessly caring for wounded soldiers and earning the nickname the Angel of the Battlefield. But even as the war effort created new opportunities, it brought heartache, with families anxiously awaiting news from the front lines. In the South, the war brought devastation. Cities like Atlanta and Richmond were transformed into hubs of Confederate military activity, but as Union forces advanced, they left a trail of destruction in their wake. Fields that once grew cotton and tobacco now stood fallow or burned. With so many men away fighting, women and children were left to manage farms, often without the resources they needed. Food shortages became common, and Confederate currency quickly lost its value, plunging families into poverty. Both sides experienced the emotional toll of war. Letters became lifelines, offering glimpses of love, worry, and resilience. Soldiers wrote about the hardships they faced, while their families wrote back with words of encouragement and longing. These letters carried the weight of entire relationships, connecting lives separated by hundreds of miles. In addition to the physical and emotional struggles, the war also brought questions of identity and purpose. Enslaved people in the South began to seize opportunities for freedom as Union forces advanced. Some escaped to the North, while others joined the Union Army, fighting for their own liberation and the promise of a new life. The Emancipation Proclamation, announced in 1862, gave their efforts a powerful voice, transforming the war into a fight not just for unity but for justice. Amid all this upheaval, communities found moments of solace. Churches became places of gathering and prayer, offering comfort to those who had lost so much. Music, too, became a source of strength. Patriotic anthems, sorrowful ballads, and spirituals filled the air, reflecting the hopes and fears of a nation at war. As you reflect on the home front, allow yourself to feel the weight of these quiet acts of resilience. Picture a mother sewing by candlelight, her stitches steady even as her heart aches with worry, or a soldier reading a letter from home, finding strength in the words of love and hope. Let these moments of humanity remind you of the enduring power of connection, even in the face of immense challenge. By 1864, the Civil War had entered its fourth year. The hope for a quick resolution had long faded, replaced by the grim reality of a war that seemed to have no end. But momentum was beginning to shift. The Union, under new and determined leadership, launched a series of campaigns that would bring the war to a close, though not without immense sacrifice. General Ulysses S. Grant had risen to command the Union forces, bringing with him a relentless strategy of total war. Unlike his predecessors, Grant was willing to engage the Confederate armies directly, knowing that the Union's superior numbers and resources could eventually wear them down. His overland campaign in Virginia was brutal, with battles like the Wilderness and Cold Harbor leaving tens of thousands dead. Yet Grant pressed on, earning the nickname Unconditional Surrender for his unwavering resolve. In the Deep South, General William Tecumseh Sherman carried out his infamous March to the Sea, cutting a path of destruction from Atlanta to Savannah. Sherman's goal was to break the South's will to fight by targeting not just its armies, but its infrastructure and resources. Railroads were torn up, factories dismantled, and crops burned. The devastation was immense, but it succeeded in crippling the Confederacy's ability to sustain the war. As Union forces closed in, Confederate morale began to crumble. Desertions increased, supplies dwindled, and the reality of defeat loomed. In April 1865, General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, the backbone of the Confederate forces, found itself surrounded near the village of Appomattox Courthouse. With no hope of escape, Lee met with Grant to negotiate surrender. Their meeting on April 9, 1865, marked the end of the war's major fighting. The terms Grant offered were generous, allowing Confederate soldiers to return home with their horses and personal belongings. His intention was to heal the nation rather than humiliate its defeated half. It was a moment of quiet dignity, the beginning of a long and difficult process of reconciliation. Yet, even as the war ended, its cost was staggering. More than 600,000 lives had been lost, and much of the South lay in ruins. President Abraham Lincoln, who had guided the Union through its darkest hours, would not live to see the fruits of his efforts. Just days after Lee's surrender, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, plunging the nation into mourning. The war had answered two critical questions. The Union would endure and slavery would not, but it left behind deep scars, both physical and emotional, that would take generations to heal. The Reconstruction era that followed was fraught with challenges, as the nation struggled to rebuild and redefine itself. As you reflect on the end of this monumental conflict, let the weight of its lessons rest gently in your thoughts. Imagine the quiet after the surrender, the weary soldiers returning home, the fields gradually returning to life, and the first rays of hope shining through the darkness. Let these images remind you of the strength it takes to rebuild and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. When the guns fell silent and the soldiers returned home, the United States was a changed nation. The Civil War had been a crucible, testing the very foundation of the country and reshaping its identity forever. Though the fighting was over, the legacy of this monumental conflict continued to echo through the generations, shaping the path forward for a fractured but hopeful nation. One of the most profound outcomes of the war was the abolition of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation had begun this process, but it was the 13th Amendment, ratified in December 1865, that formally ended the institution that had defined so much of the nation's conflict. Millions of formerly enslaved people began new lives, but the road ahead was steep. The promises of freedom were met with resistance, and the Reconstruction era revealed just how deep the division still ran. The war also redefined the relationship between the states and the federal government. No longer would the question of secession hang over the Union. The victory of the North solidified the idea that the United States was not just a collection of states, but a single, indivisible nation. It was a hard-fought truth, one that cost countless lives but ultimately preserved the Union. Yet the scars of war were everywhere. The South faced immense physical and economic devastation. Cities had been reduced to rubble, and entire communities were struggling to rebuild. The loss of so many men left families broken and towns forever changed. Even in the North, where victory was celebrated, the weight of the sacrifices made was impossible to ignore. For the soldiers who fought, the war left an indelible mark. Some returned home to rebuild their lives, carrying memories of camaraderie and courage. Others bore wounds, both seen and unseen, that would shape the rest of their days. Memorials began to rise in towns across the country, honouring the fallen and reminding future generations of the cost of conflict. The Civil War also left a legacy of storytelling. Veterans shared their experiences, songs from the era became part of the cultural fabric, and writers like Walt Whitman and Ambrose Bierce captured the emotional depth of the war in poetry and prose. These stories served not only to remember, but to help a nation heal, to bridge the gaps between North and South, and to offer lessons for the future. As you reflect on the legacy of the Civil War, let the enormity of its lessons settle softly in your thoughts. Imagine the strength of a people rebuilding from such a devastating chapter, the resilience to start anew, the courage to face an uncertain future, and the hope that guided them toward a brighter horizon. Let these reflections fill you with a quiet sense of gratitude and peace. The Cuban Missile Crisis didn't arise in a vacuum. It was the culmination of years of Cold War tensions, a time when the world seemed to teeter on the edge of uncertainty. Imagine, for a moment, the quiet hum of the post-war era giving way to the slow, steady march of ideological rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. This rivalry, like a deep and resonant drumbeat, echoed across the globe, shaping the landscapes of diplomacy and conflict alike. The United States, with its vision of democracy, and the Soviet Union, determined to spread communism, found themselves locked in a careful and delicate dance, their every move calculated, every gesture weighted with significance. By the early 1960s, this struggle had already seen pivotal moments, like the Berlin blockade and the Korean War, leaving an enduring imprint on the hearts and minds of millions. Then came 1959, a turning point that brought Cuba into sharp focus. The Cuban Revolution swept through the island like a soft but unrelenting wind, carrying Fidel Castro to power and replacing the Batista regime. Under Castro, Cuba aligned itself with the Soviet Union, transforming into a communist stronghold just 90 miles from American shores, a distance so short it might as well have been a whisper across the ocean. This proximity brought with it a quiet but undeniable unease, a tension that settled in the minds of US leaders like a lingering shadow. The hum of covert operations soon followed, culminating in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. This misstep, like a ripple in still water, spread embarrassment for the Kennedy administration and deepened the chasm of mistrust between the US and Cuba. At the same time, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, ever watchful and calculating, saw an opportunity to exploit this growing divide. He began to weave a plan that would take full advantage of Cuba's location, creating a web of uncertainty and anticipation that seemed to stretch endlessly across the calm skies. As we linger in this moment of reflection, picture a world on edge yet still wrapped in quiet resolve. Let these images and thoughts drift gently through your mind, like leaves carried by a slow, steady current. The stage was set, each thread of tension delicately placed, weaving the intricate fabric of what would soon become one of the most dramatic and perilous moments in modern history. In the quiet skies of October 14th, 1962, something extraordinary unfolded, something that would ripple through time like a soft, endless wave. High above the peaceful landscapes of Cuba, an American U-2 reconnaissance plane glided effortlessly, its sleek form cutting through the stillness of the heavens. From its vantage point, the plane captured a series of photographs, silent yet profound, revealing a truth that would shake the world. Soviet missile sites, nestled discreetly amidst the lush and tranquil countryside, were under construction. These were no ordinary missiles. Their presence was like a whisper of something immense and dangerous, carrying with them the potential for devastation. capable of reaching the heart of the United States within mere moments. These medium and intermediate range ballistic missiles carried the weight of a silent, looming threat. The images, delicate and unassuming, were swiftly brought back to Washington, where they were met with a storm of hushed urgency and careful deliberation. Picture the scene as President John F. Kennedy and his advisors gathered in the stillness of the White House. The room was heavy with the quiet murmur of voices, each one low and deliberate as the photographs were laid out like puzzle pieces on a smooth, polished table. The gravity of the discovery hung in the air, a presence as tangible as the tick of a distant clock. Each second stretched, slow and steady, like the rhythm of a deep and calming breath. As the advisors spoke, their words mingled with the ambient quiet, and the room seemed to hold its breath. It became clear that this was not just a military challenge, but a profound shift in the balance of power. The missiles in Cuba mirrored the US's own installations in Turkey, creating a precarious symmetry of threat that deepened the unease. This delicate balance, like a tightrope suspended above a chasm, demanded extraordinary care and calm. For a moment, close your eyes and imagine the scene. The soft rustle of papers, the distant hum of voices, and the unspoken tension that lingers in the air like a gentle mist. This was a time of reflection, a time when the world seemed poised on the edge of a decision that could change everything. Yet, amidst the tension, there was also a stillness, a fragile sense of order holding back the chaos beyond. As the president and his team weighed their options, the choices before them seemed infinite, like waves rolling gently onto a shore. Diplomacy, military action, or something in between, each decision carried the weight of an uncertain future. But for now, in this moment, let these thoughts settle, like leaves falling softly to the ground, as the story gently unfolds further into the night. In the days that followed the discover, the world seemed to move in slow motion, each moment drawn out as though the air itself had grown thicker, heavier. President Kennedy and his advisors, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, often referred to as ExComm, met repeatedly in the quiet, reflective halls of the White House. Their discussions, careful and deliberate, centered on one pressing question: how to respond to this grave discovery. The choices before them were as weighty as the stillness that filled the room. One option was a military strike to destroy the missile sites, swift and decisive. Another was a full-scale invasion of Cuba, an action that would surely provoke a direct confrontation with the Soviet Union. But even as these strategies were considered, their risks loomed large, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. A misstep could spark the very thing they all feared: a nuclear war that might engulf the world in unimaginable devastation. Amid the tense deliberations, a third option emerged, one that seemed to offer a chance for resolution without immediate violence: a naval quarantine of Cuba. This option, though less aggressive, was no less bold. By establishing a blockade to prevent further delivery of Soviet missiles and military equipment to the island, the United States could demonstrate its resolve while leaving room for diplomacy to take hold. The term quarantine was chosen carefully, softer than blockade, to avoid the suggestion of an act of war. Picture, if you will, the long pauses between words as the advisors weighed this plan. Their voices, low and measured, filled the space like the gentle lapping of waves against a shore. The room, dimly lit and hushed, seemed to hold its breath as the implications of the quarantine began to crystallize. Would it be enough to deter the Soviets, or would it provoke them into escalating the conflict further? The question lingered, unanswered, like a faint echo in the stillness. On October 22, 1962, President Kennedy addressed the nation in a speech that broke the quiet tension of those days. His calm and steady voice carried across the airwaves, explaining the situation and announcing the quarantine. He described the missiles in Cuba as a secret, swift and extraordinary build-up, and made it clear that the United States would not tolerate this threat so close to its shores. Yet, even in this moment of firm resolve, there was an undercurrent of hope, a hope that reason might prevail, that diplomacy might yet find a path through the shadows of uncertainty. Imagine the millions of listeners across the world leaning closer to their radios, their breaths slowing as the words sank in. The quarantine was now in place, a quiet but firm line drawn in the waters around Cuba. The decision was made, yet the outcome remained unknown, hanging in the air like a gentle mist at dawn. As we move forward, let these thoughts rest gently in your mind, like whispers carried on a cool, soothing breeze as we drift deeper into this unfolding story. Take a moment, breathe deeply, slowly, and imagine the calm before a storm, the kind of quiet that hums with anticipation when time seems to stretch and every second feels longer than the last. This was the atmosphere as the United States naval quarantine of Cuba went into effect on October 24, 1962. The blockade was not just a line drawn in the water, it was a test of wills between two superpowers. American warships moved into position, forming a silent, steady wall in the ocean, ready to intercept any Soviet vessels attempting to deliver more missiles or military supplies to Cuba. These ships, though distant from the shorelines, carried with them the weight of a global audience's gaze as the world watched and waited, holding its collective breath. Far away in the stillness of the Kremlin, Premier Khrushchev faced his own moment of reflection. Soviet ships were already en route to Cuba, some carrying cargo that would challenge the blockade directly. Would they stop or press on? To retreat might signal weakness. To advance might spark open conflict. The tension was palpable, an invisible thread pulling tighter with each passing hour. Imagine the seas, vast and unyielding, their surface calm but concealing a profound sense of unease beneath. The American ships floated silently, their crews ready but motionless, listening to the soft rhythm of the waves and the low hum of the engines. Across the Atlantic, the Soviet vessels continued their approach, the space between them shrinking slowly, steadily, like the narrowing of a great and ominous gulf. Back in Washington, the ExCom held near-constant meetings, their discussions now carrying the gravity of the quarantine's first test. Reports from the blockade zone came in, each one met with careful deliberation. The tension in those rooms was thick, almost tangible, as though it might spill out into the world beyond. Every voice was measured, every pause significant, as the weight of their decisions pressed down like a blanket of still and heavy air. Then, on October the 25th, an eerie moment of calm arrived. The Soviet ships stopped just short of the blockade line. This pause, this single moment of restraint, was both a relief and a reminder of how precariously balanced the situation remained. Khrushchev sent a message proposing negotiations, a glimmer of light breaking through the clouds of uncertainty. For a moment, let your mind linger on this fragile quiet. Imagine the stillness of the ocean, the distant shapes of the ships, and the muffled sounds of calm activity on deck. It was a pause, but not yet a resolution, like the faintest hint of dawn before the sun begins to rise. As the world held its breath, the next moves remained uncertain, waiting to unfold with the slow and deliberate pace of history itself. Pause for a moment. Let the tension of the previous days fade and allow yourself to sink into this pivotal chapter, a time when words, not weapons, became the instruments of a potential resolution. As the blockade held firm and Soviet ships paused in their advance, the crisis shifted from the oceans to the realm of communication. It was now a battle of letters and messages, where every word carried the weight of the world. On October 26th, Premier Khrushchev sent the first of two letters to President Kennedy. It was a message of emotion and urgency, filled with words that seemed almost pleading, like whispers carried on a breeze. Khrushchev proposed a resolution. The the Soviet Union would withdraw its missiles from Cuba if the United States would promise not to invade the island. The tone was personal, almost vulnerable, as if Khrushchev sought to reach Kennedy not as an adversary, but as a fellow human standing on the precipice of disaster. The next day, however, brought a second letter, different in tone, harsher, more calculated. This one demanded that the United States also remove its Jupiter missiles from Turkey, an escalation that added a new layer of complexity to the already delicate negotiations. These letters, arriving like waves in succession, left Kennedy and his advisers navigating treacherous waters. Which message represented Khrushchev's true intent? Was this a sincere offer or a ploy to gain an upper hand? In the stillness of the White House, Kennedy and the ex-com deliberated late into the night. Their discussions were careful, deliberate, each word spoken slowly, as if to avoid disturbing the fragile balance they were trying to maintain. The question lingered in the air like the soft echo of distant footsteps. How could they accept the first offer without appearing weak, while also avoiding a direct confrontation that might spiral into war? Imagine the quiet of those rooms, filled only with the faint rustling of papers and the low hum of thought. It was a moment of immense pressure, but also one of profound restraint, as though the weight of their decisions was held aloft by a delicate and invisible thread. Finally, Kennedy made his choice. He responded to Khrushchev's first letter, agreeing to the proposal of a non-invasion pledge in exchange for the removal of the missiles from Cuba. The Jupiter missiles in Turkey were not mentioned in this reply, a deliberate omission meant to simplify the path to resolution. At the same time, Robert Kennedy, the president's brother and attorney general, quietly met with Soviet ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin to discuss the removal of the Turkish missiles as a separate, unofficial arrangement. As the letters were exchanged, the world waited in silence. Imagine millions of hearts beating slowly, steadily, as the fate of humanity seemed to hang in the balance. This was diplomacy at its most fragile, like a fine thread spun across an open void. And yet, in that fragility, there was also hope, a faint but growing light at the end of a long and shadowed tunnel. Let this, though, drift gently through your mind as we move toward the final chapter of this remarkable story, where the crisis finds its resolution and the world begins to exhale. As the sun rose on October 28, 1962, the world awoke to a glimmer of relief. Premier Khrushchev announced that the Soviet Union would dismantle and remove its missiles from Cuba. His decision, conveyed in a public radio broadcast, marked the end of the 13-day standoff that had brought humanity to the brink of nuclear war. The missiles, he declared, would be taken apart and the weaponry returned to the Soviet Union under United Nations supervision. For President Kennedy, this was a moment of cautious triumph. The US quarantine had succeeded in forcing a peaceful resolution without resorting to violence. The secret agreement to remove the American Jupiter missiles from Turkey added a layer of complexity but remained undisclosed to the public, allowing both nations to save face in the eyes of the world. In the following days, work began to de-escalate the situation. Soviet personnel in Cuba started dismantling the missile sites, and American reconnaissance planes confirmed the progress. Meanwhile, the US ships maintained their positions until the removal was complete, standing as quiet sentinels of the fragile peace that now settled over the Caribbean. The resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis was hailed as a victory for diplomacy, but it left an enduring impact on both nations. In the United States, Kennedy emerged as a skilled leader who had successfully navigated the most dangerous crisis of the Cold War. For Khrushchev, the crisis was a humbling moment that exposed the limits of Soviet power and, in part, contributed to his eventual removal from office. Yet, the aftermath also brought reflection. The sheer proximity to disaster prompted both superpowers to reconsider their approach to conflict and diplomacy. In 1963, the two nations established the Moscow-Washington hotline, a direct communication link designed to prevent misunderstandings and delays in future crises. It was a small but significant step toward reducing the risk of nuclear confrontation. Imagine the stillness of those post-crisis days. The world, so recently shadowed by the threat of annihilation, now seemed quieter, calmer, as if holding its breath in gratitude. The Cuban Missile Crisis had shown how close humanity could come to its own destruction, and how essential it was to step back from the edge. In the years that followed, the crisis became a symbol of both the dangers of the nuclear age and the power of restraint and diplomacy. It remains a reminder of the delicate balance that sustains peace and the courage required to preserve it. As we reflect on the Cuban Missile Crisis, we realize its profound significance in shaping the trajectory of history. These 13 days in October 1962 were more than just a tense standoff between two superpowers. They were a moment when humanity stood on the edge of a precipice, where the future of the world hung in the balance. The resolution of the crisis, through diplomacy, restraint, and the courage to seek peace, reminds us of the fragile nature of our existence and the deep responsibility we all share to preserve it. The Cuban Missile Crisis serves as a testament to the power of careful communication and the importance of maintaining calm in the face of peril. It is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when fear and uncertainty seem overwhelming, it is possible to find a path toward peace through understanding and cooperation. The decisions made during that crisis, by leaders and diplomats alike, were not just about averting disaster, but about fostering a future in which humanity could move forward, together, with a deeper commitment to avoiding the devastation of war. This story, with all its tension and drama, carries with it a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that through diplomacy, cooler heads prevailed. The crisis could have led to a catastrophe, but instead, it ended with the restoration of a delicate peace, and as we find comfort in that resolution, we can allow ourselves to drift into a space of tranquility, knowing that even in the most tumultuous times, peace is always within our reach if we dare to reach for it. As we close this chapter on the Cuban Missile Crisis, take a moment to feel the weight of history's lessons wash over you, soothing your mind and heart. The story, though intense, carries with it a sense of relief and calm, a reminder that peace, like the most gentle rain, can cleanse even the deepest tensions. Now, as we begin to let go of these thoughts, allow the soft sound of rain in the background to fill your senses. Let the music gently carry you, like a breeze through the trees, into a state of deep relaxation. The calm, steady rhythm of the rain, with its soothing patter and the quiet hum of the night, will help you unwind fully, offering a peaceful escape as you settle into a restful sleep. For over a millennium, Constantinople stood as a marvel of human ingenuity and resilience. Perched strategically at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, its location made it a hub for trade, culture, and power. The city's imposing walls, originally constructed by Emperor Theodosius II in the 5th century, were considered nearly impregnable. These triple-layered fortifications, stretching for miles, were the pride of the Byzantine Empire and the bane of invaders. By the mid-15th century, however, the Byzantine Empire was a shadow of its former self, reduced to the city of Constantinople and a few scattered territories. The once mighty empire that had ruled vast regions now found itself encircled by the rising power of the Ottoman Empire. To the east, Sultan Mehmed II, an ambitious and brilliant leader, had set his sights on conquering the city, seeing it as the key to solidifying his rule and expanding his domain. Inside the walls of Constantinople, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos faced an uncertain future. With only a few thousand defenders, comprised of weary Byzantine soldiers, and a handful of foreign allies, the city was woefully underprepared for the onslaught that loomed. Supplies were dwindling, and the population, though fiercely loyal, lived under the constant shadow of impending doom. Yet, despite the odds, The emperor refused to surrender. He was determined to fight to the end. As the Ottomans prepared for their siege, they brought with them an arsenal unlike anything the world had seen before. Among their weapons was a massive cannon, constructed by a Hungarian engineer named Orban. This cannon, capable of hurling enormous stone projectiles, was designed to breach even the strongest walls. The Ottomans also amassed a fleet to blockade the city by sea, ensuring that no reinforcements or supplies could reach the defenders. This stage was set for an epic confrontation that would, on April 6, 1453, the Ottoman forces began their assault on Constantinople. Sultan Mehmed II, commanding an army of nearly 80,000 soldiers, surrounded the city by land and sea. His troops included elite janissaries, heavy artillery units, and cavalry, all meticulously prepared for the battle. In stark contrast, the defenders of Constantinople, numbering only about 7,000, relied on the strength of their walls, their limited resources, and their unwavering determination to hold off the invaders. As the siege commenced, the Ottoman cannon began its relentless bombardment. Each thunderous shot shook the ground, sending massive stones crashing into the city's formidable walls. The defenders scrambled to repair the damage as quickly as possible, working day and night to reinforce the crumbling sections. Yet, despite the damage, the walls of Constantinople held firm, frustrating the attackers and delaying their advance. By sea, Mehmed's fleet blockaded the Golden Horn, the narrow inlet that provided access to the city's harbour. In a bold and desperate move, the Byzantines constructed a massive chain boom across the entrance to the harbour, preventing Ottoman ships from breaching this vital area. For weeks, the two sides engaged in fierce skirmishes on the water, with neither gaining a decisive advantage. Within the city, life became a mix of hope and despair. Citizens prayed fervently in the Grand Hagia Sophia, seeking solace and strength. Meanwhile, Emperor Constantine XI worked tirelessly to inspire his people, walking among the defenders on the walls, offering words of encouragement and sharing in their hardships. His presence was a source of unity in a city under siege. Sultan Mehmed II, determined to break the stalemate, devised a bold plan to outflank the city's defences. Using an extraordinary feat of engineering, he ordered his troops to transport ships overland on greased logs, bypassing the chain boom and launching them into the waters of the Golden Horn. This manoeuvre shocked the defenders and marked a turning point in the siege. As the weeks wore on, the defenders of Constantinople grew more exhausted. Supplies dwindled, and morale wavered as the walls suffered greater damage, yet they continued to resist, determined to protect their home against all odds. Imagine the long nights spent on the battlements, the glow of torches illuminating As April turned to May, the siege of Constantinople escalated into a relentless struggle. The Ottoman bombardment grew fiercer. Cannons fired day and night, chipping away at the once mighty Theodosian walls. Dust and debris filled the air, coating the streets and homes of the city. Despite the constant destruction, the defenders worked tirelessly to repair breaches, often under the cover of darkness. Every stone they placed was an act of defiance against the overwhelming forces pressing in around them. Inside the city, the mood shifted between grim determination and quiet fear. Emperor Constantine XI continued to rally his people, addressing soldiers, citizens and priests alike. His words were simple but powerful, reminding them that they were fighting not just for their lives but for their culture, faith and history. Families huddled together in their homes, offering whispered prayers for protection. In the Hagia Sophia, the city's spiritual heart, the clergy led solemn services, their chants echoing in the grand dome chamber. Outside the walls, Sultan Mehmed II adjusted his strategy. Recognizing the defenders' stubborn resistance, he ordered his engineers to dig tunnels beneath the city's walls in an effort to weaken their foundation. Byzantine forces countered this threat by sending teams of sappers to intercept the tunnels, leading to deadly confrontations beneath the ground. These underground battles, fought in narrow, dimly lit passageways, added another layer of desperation to an already harrowing siege. The Ottomans also intensified their efforts on the Golden Horn. The fleet, now partially inside the harbour thanks to Mehmed's audacious manoeuvre, launched a series of attacks on the Byzantine navy. The defenders fought valiantly, using fire ships and skilled tactics to hold off the superior Ottoman fleet. But their resources were stretched thin, and each victory came at a high cost. the city's residents faced growing hardships. Food supplies dwindled, forcing strict rationing and leading to widespread hunger. The constant noise of the siege, cannon blasts, the clash of swords, and the cries of battle made restful sleep nearly impossible. And yet, the people endured, drawing strength from their shared purpose and their leaders' unyielding resolve. As May progressed, the city's defenders began to realise that relief from the outside was unlikely. The Venetian and Genoese fleets, though sympathetic to the Byzantine cause, were entangled in their own conflicts and slow to act. Constantinople stood alone against the might of the Ottoman Empire. The stage was set for a climactic confrontation. The city was battered but unbroken, its defenders refusing to yield despite the impossible odds. The Ottomans, frustrated by the slow progress of the siege, prepared for an all-out assault to breach the walls and claim their prize. The air was heavy with tension, every moment pregnant with the possibility of triumph or tragedy. As the final days of the siege approached, one could feel the weight of history bearing down on Constantinople. The city's fate hung in the balance, and the world watched, waiting to see how this epic struggle would end. Yet as the cannon blasts faded into the distance and the days turned into long quiet nights, imagine the peaceful stillness settling over the defenders of the city. The weight of the struggle seemed to lift, replaced by a soft calm that allowed weary. On May 29th, 1453, after nearly 2 months of relentless bombardment and siege, Sultan Mehmed II ordered his forces to make their final push. The battered walls of Constantinople, once thought impenetrable, could no longer hold against the might of the Ottoman army. As the sun rose on that fateful morning, the air was thick with tension, and the distant rumble of approaching soldiers could be heard over the stillness of the city. The defenders, though exhausted and outnumbered, had one final opportunity to hold the line. Emperor Constantine XI, fully aware of the gravity of the moment, donned his armour and walked once more among his soldiers. His face, normally calm and composed, now carried the weight of his kingdom's fate. The emperor's rallying cry was simple: freedom or death, and he urged his soldiers to fight for their city and for their lives. Meanwhile, on the Ottoman side, Sultan Mehmed II had prepared for this day with meticulous care. His engineers worked tirelessly to breach the walls using battering rams, and his elite Janissary troops positioned themselves to take the city by force. A final, massive cannon barrage rang out across the city as the Ottomans made their move. With each blast, the walls of Constantinople groaned, and the defenders scrambled to repair what they could, but the damage had taken its toll. At the same time, the Ottoman fleet, now fully in position within the Golden Horn, moved to blockade the last remaining escape routes by sea. Constantinople, once a beacon of power and culture, was now a city trapped. Its streets, filled with the sounds of combat, became narrow avenues of despair and defiance. As the battle raged in the city, the defenders fought valiantly, but it was clear that the odds were stacked against them. The walls were crumbling. The artillery had breached a gap large enough for the Ottoman forces to swarm in. The fighting grew fiercer, house by house, street by street, as the city's residents and soldiers tried to push back the invaders, but there were too many Ottomans, and their determination to conquer the city was overwhelming. As the day wore on, the fate of Constantinople was sealed. By afternoon, the Ottomans had broken through the walls, and the city began to fall. Emperor Constantine XI, realizing that the end was near, fought bravely until the very last. But when the Ottoman forces entered the city, they found no mercy. The city was overrun, and its defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, were either captured or slain. The fall of Constantinople was not just the fall of a city, it was the end of an era. The Byzantine Empire, which had once been a powerful force in Europe and Asia, was no more. The city, now in Ottoman hands, would be renamed Istanbul and become the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. As you reflect on the fall of this great city, imagine the silence that followed the chaos of battle. The cries of the defeated soldiers faded into quiet, and the city, now under new rule, began its transformation. The once grand buildings, the churches, and the bustling marketplaces were left to be reborn into something new. Let the stillness of this moment, the fall of Constantinople, mark the end of one era and the beginning of another, reverberating far beyond the walls of the ancient city. As the Ottomans took control, they reshaped not only the city's physical appearance, but also its cultural, political, and religious landscape. The Byzantine Empire, which had once been the protector of Christian Orthodox traditions, was gone. The city of Constantinople, now Istanbul, would become the heart of a new empire, the Ottoman Empire, bringing with it a wave of change that would echo through history for centuries. The fall of Constantinople was a pivotal moment for Europe, signalling the end of the medieval period and the start of the Renaissance. With the loss of one of the most important Christian cities, scholars, artisans, and intellectuals fled to the west, carrying with them priceless knowledge and manuscripts. The Greeks, who had lived under Byzantine rule for generations, brought their learning to places like Florence, Venice, and Rome. The rediscovery of classical texts and ancient Greek philosophy fueled the Renaissance, sparking a new era of intellectual and artistic flourishing. But the impact of the city's fall was not just felt in the West. For the Ottomans, capturing Constantinople was a moment of immense pride and significance. Sultan Mehmed II, now known as the Conqueror, solidified his legacy and the Ottoman Empire's power. He established a new capital that would rival all other cities in the world, renaming it Istanbul, and began transforming it into a thriving metropolis. The Hagia Sophia, once a Christian cathedral and a symbol of Byzantine glory, was converted into a mosque, and the city's skyline would be dominated by the grand minarets of Ottoman mosques. The Ottomans also began to expand their empire, pushing further into Europe, Asia, and Africa. Constantinople's fall opened up new trade routes and positioned the Ottomans as the dominant force in the eastern Mediterranean. The city's strategic location between Europe and Asia gave the Ottomans control of crucial land and sea trade routes, further strengthening their empire. In the centuries that followed, the legacy of Constantinople would continue to shape the world. For the East, it became a symbol of Ottoman strength and prosperity. For the West, it served as a reminder of the fragility of empires and the shifting tides of history. The fall of Constantinople was more than just a military victory. It was a symbolic event that signalled the changing balance of power in the world. As you reflect on the long-reaching consequences of this moment in history, imagine how the passing of James concludes his story by speaking about the legacy that the whispered patrol left behind, not just for his grandfather, but for all who hear this tale. He explains how his grandfather would share this story, not as a tale of heroism, but as a lesson in the power of silence and understanding. The story, passed down through generations, became a reminder of how even in the darkest times, moments of quiet could lead to profound insights about humanity. He shares how this story influenced his grandfather's life long after the war, shaping his philosophy towards conflict, towards listening rather than speaking, towards understanding rather than judging. James reflects on how this legacy of silence taught his family the value of empathy, of taking the time to listen to the world around them, and how these lessons could apply to anyone's life. In the narrative, James invites his listeners to think about this legacy as they prepare for sleep. He asks them to consider how often in their own lives they rush to fill silence with noise, with words, with action, when perhaps the most profound connections or solutions come from simply listening, from allowing silence to speak. He suggests that as they drift off, they might carry this lesson into their dreams, into their subconscious, where the quiet can work its magic, healing, teaching, and connecting in ways that the day's noise cannot. James ends by encouraging his listeners to embrace the silence of the night, to let it be a teacher, a healer, a connector. He posits that just as his grandfather's patrol found peace in silence amidst war, we too can find our peace in the quiet moments of our lives, in the pauses between our actions, in the spaces where we allow ourselves to truly hear. He invites them to ponder on how this story might influence their approach to life, to conflict, to understanding others, and to find in their own silence a legacy of peace and empathy. As his voice fades, leaving the listeners to the sounds of their own breathing and the gentle ambience of the night, James wishes them good night, hoping that the tale of the whispered patrol lingers in their minds, offering a peaceful drift into sleep, wrapped in the comforting embrace of silence's profound lessons. the summer of 1863 to the rolling fields of Pennsylvania, where the Battle of Gettysburg forever changed the course of the American Civil War. This is a story of courage, sacrifice, and resilience, told not through the roar of cannons, but through the quiet lens of reflection. Before we begin, take a moment to share where you're listening from and what time it is. Knowing that we're all connected by these stories of the past brings a comforting sense of togetherness. If you enjoy these calming narratives, please consider subscribing to History and Sleep so we can continue to share these peaceful journeys through history. Now, find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and let your mind settle as we delve into the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. Relax your shoulders and settle in as we begin this reflective journey into one of World War II's most remarkable chapters, the legacy of the Night Witches. And ordinary lives were transformed into extraordinary acts of defiance. It's a powerful story, so get comfortable and let's dive in. The Battle of Stalingrad began in the summer of 1942. During the height of World War II, the German army, under Adolf Hitler's command, launched a massive offensive aimed at capturing the industrial city of Stalingrad on the Volga River. Stalingrad was more than just a strategic target. It bore the name of the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, and its capture would deal a psychological blow to the Soviet Union. For Hitler, taking Stalingrad was as much about prestige as it was about military strategy. Stalingrad was a vital industrial hub, producing weapons, ammunition, and supplies. Crucial to the Soviet war effort, its location on the Volga River made it a key transportation route linking the northern and southern regions of the Soviet Union. For Stalin, the city's defense was non-negotiable. Losing it would be both a symbolic and logistical disaster. In August 1942, the German Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, began its advance on Stalingrad. The city, a sprawling industrial expanse with factories, railways, and residential areas, became the site of one of the most grueling battles in history. The Germans were initially confident of a swift victory, but the Soviet defenders, under the command of General Vasily Chuikov, were determined to resist at all costs. The fighting in Stalingrad was unlike anything the world had seen before. Urban warfare turned every street, building, and factory into a battleground. The Germans and Soviets engaged in brutal close-quarters combat, often fighting room by room, floor by floor. The city became a labyrinth of destruction, with rubble and debris transforming entire neighborhoods into treacherous landscapes. The Soviets adopted a strategy of hugging the German forces, staying as close as possible to avoid being targeted by German airstrikes and artillery. This forced the Germans into relentless hand-to-hand combat, draining their resources and morale. Soviet snipers, hidden in the ruins, became a deadly force, picking off German soldiers with precision. One of the most famous snipers, Vasily Zaitsev, became a symbol of Soviet resilience, his actions inspiring defenders across the city. Hinduism, Christianity, and Buddhism. These studies broadened his perspective and laid the foundation for his. As the weeks turned into months, the harsh Russian winter set in, adding another layer of misery to the already dire conditions. Temperatures plummeted, and both sides struggled to survive in the freezing cold. Supplies dwindled, and hunger and disease took their toll. Yet, despite the suffering, the Soviets held firm. Reinforcements and supplies continued to trickle into the city across the frozen Volga River ensuring that the defenders could maintain their resistance. The turning point in the Battle of Stalingrad came in November 1942 with the launch of Operation Uranus. The Soviet High Command, led by General Georgy Zhukov, devised a bold counteroffensive to encircle the German Sixth Army. While the Germans just were focused on their assault within the city, the Soviets launched massive attacks on the weaker flanks of the German forces held by Romanian and Italian troops. The plan was a success. Within days, the Soviet pincers closed around Stalingrad, trapping the German Sixth Army inside the city. What followed was a desperate struggle for survival. The encircled German forces, numbering over 300,000 men, were cut off from supplies and reinforcements. Hitler, refusing to allow a retreat, ordered Paulus to hold the city at all costs. The Luftwaffe attempted to airlift supplies to the encircled troops, but the efforts were insufficient. The soldiers inside the pocket faced starvation, freezing temperatures, and relentless Soviet attacks. The Soviets tightened their grip on the city, systematically destroying the remaining German positions. The defenders' situation became increasingly hopeless, and morale plummeted. In January 1943, the Soviets launched their final assault to crush the pocket. By this time, Paulus and his men were exhausted, demoralized, and out of options. On February 2nd, 1943, Paulus surrendered, marking the end of the Battle of Stalingrad. The Soviet victory was a turning point in the war, shattering the myth of German invincibility and shifting the momentum in favor of the Allies. It was a devastating blow to Hitler's ambitions, and the loss of the Sixth Army was a humiliation from which Germany would never fully recover. The cost of the battle, however, was staggering. Over 2 million soldiers and civilians were killed, wounded, or captured. During the 5 months of fighting, Stalingrad itself was left in ruins, its streets and buildings reduced to rubble. The human suffering on both sides was immense, with countless families forever altered by the loss of loved ones. Despite the Battle of Stalingrad remains one of the most studied and remembered events of World War II. It serves as a testament to the courage and determination of those who fought, and as a reminder of the horrors of war. The sacrifices made at Stalingrad helped shape the course of history, paving the way for the eventual Allied victory. As you drift into sleep tonight, let the story of Stalingrad remind you of the strength of the human spirit and the resilience that emerges in the face of adversity. Imagine the quiet, snow-covered streets of the rebuilt city, the echoes of history carried gently on the wind. Let the bravery and sacrifice of those who endured inspire a sense of gratitude and peace within you. The story of the Battle of Stalingrad did not end with the surrender of the German Sixth Army. Its aftermath rippled far beyond the frozen streets of the ruined city, shaping the course of World War II and the history of the 20th century. The Soviet victory was a turning point, not just for the Eastern Front, but for the entire Allied effort. It demonstrated the determination and resilience of the Soviet people and marked the beginning of a relentless push to drive the Axis forces out of the Soviet Union and eventually defeat them in Europe. The cost of the battle was nearly unimaginable. The casualty figures are staggering. with estimates placing the total number of dead, wounded, or missing on both sides at over 2 million. Civilians caught in the crossfire endured unimaginable suffering as the city they called home became a war zone of unthinkable destruction. Homes were destroyed, families torn apart, and lives forever altered by the relentless tide of war. For the survivors of Stalingrad, the end of the battle brought no immediate relief. The city, once a thriving industrial centre, lay in ruins. Entire neighbourhoods had been reduced to rubble, and the infrastructure necessary for daily life, water, electricity, food supplies, was obliterated. The people of Stalingrad faced the monumental task of rebuilding their lives and their city from the ashes. Yet, even in the face of such devastation, there was a sense of pride and determination among the survivors. They had endured the unendurable and emerged victorious. The Soviet government worked swiftly to rebuild Stalingrad. The city became a symbol of resilience and sacrifice, a beacon. The Soviets capitalized on their victory at Stalingrad, launching a series of offensives that pushed the Germans further and further west. The Red Army's momentum, gained at such great cost in Stalingrad, carried them all the way to Berlin by the spring of 1945. The victory at Stalingrad was the foundation upon which the eventual Soviet triumph in World War II was built. Beyond its military significance, the Battle of Stalingrad left a profound legacy in the collective memory of the world. It became a symbol of resilience, sacrifice, and the unyielding human spirit. The stories of the soldiers and civilians who endured the battle, stories of heroism, endurance, and survival, continue to resonate. Their experiences remind us of the horrors of war, the cost of conflict, and the strength of the human will to persevere. For the people of Stalingrad, their city's name became synonymous with courage and defiance. In 1961, during a wave of de-Stalinization in the Soviet Union, the city was renamed Volgograd, yet the memory of the Battle of Stalingrad remained deeply embedded in the hearts of those who lived through it and those who came after. The name Stalingrad continues to evoke the profound sacrifices made during those grueling months of battle. The battlefields of Stalingrad have since been preserved as places of remembrance and reflection. The Myrmiev Kurgan Memorial Complex, with its towering statue of the Motherland Calls, stands as a testament to the courage and sacrifice of those who fought and died there. Visitors from around the world come to walk the hallowed ground, to honour the memory of the fallen, and to reflect on the lessons of history. As we look back on the Battle of Stalingrad, it serves as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. It is a story of sacrifice and survival, of hope and determination, and of the enduring belief in the possibility of a better future. As you rest tonight, let the story of Stalingrad remind you of the strength that lies within us all. Imagine the quiet streets of the rebuilt city, the soft whispers of the Volga River, and the stillness that now blankets a place once filled with chaos. Let the courage and sacrifice for decades. The memory of Stalingrad shaped the Soviet Union's identity and its portrayal on the global stage. The battle was celebrated in films, literature, and art, each retelling emphasizing the unity and determination of the Soviet people. The city became a pilgrimage site for veterans, their families, and historians seeking to understand the profound impact of this defining moment in history on a more personal level. The stories of those who fought and survived the battle have been passed down through generations. Veterans shared their experiences with their children and grandchildren, ensuring that the sacrifices made at Stalingrad would never be forgotten. These personal accounts, filled with both sorrow and pride, add depth to the historical narrative and remind us of the humanity behind the statistics. Globally, Stalingrad has become a symbol of resistance and perseverance. Its name is invoked in discussions of strategy, endurance, and the high cost of war for historians and military scholars. The battle offers countless lessons on tactics, leadership, and the interplay of morale and logistics for ordinary people. It stands as a reminder of what can be achieved when the human spirit refuses to yield. In recent years, efforts have been made to preserve the memory of Stalingrad while fostering a spirit of reconciliation. Memorials and museums now serve not only as places of remembrance, but also as venues for dialogue and education. They encourage visitors to reflect on the consequences of war and the importance of working toward peace. The city of Volgograd, while forever tied to its past, is also a thriving modern metropolis. Its people have rebuilt their lives and created a vibrant community that honors its history. While looking to the future, the scars of the battle remain. The total number of casualties is estimated at over 2 million, making it one of the deadliest battles in human history. These figures include soldiers from both sides, as well as countless civilians caught in the crossfire. The German Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, was one of the most formidable forces in Hitler's military. At its peak, the Sixth Army was comprised of over 300,000 soldiers. By the end of the battle, nearly 91,000 German soldiers were taken prisoner, including General Paulus himself. The Soviet strategy of hugging the enemy, staying in close combat to neutralize the Germans' artillery and air superiority, played a critical role in the city's defense. This tactic turned the urban ruins of Stalingrad into a deadly maze for the German forces. Vasily Zaitsev, a Soviet sniper, became a symbol of the defenders' resilience. During the battle, he is credited with killing over 225 German soldiers, including enemy snipers, which boosted the morale of his comrades. Operation Uranus, a Soviet counteroffensive launched in November 1942, was a brilliantly executed maneuver. By attacking the weaker flanks of the German forces held by Romanian and Italian troops, the Soviets were able to encircle and trap the German Sixth Army within the city. The German soldiers trapped in the encirclement, known as the Kessel, or cauldron, endured horrific conditions. They faced starvation, freezing temperatures, and relentless Soviet assaults. Supplies delivered by air were woefully inadequate, leading to widespread suffering and death. One of the defining moments of the battle was Hitler's refusal to allow Paulus to retreat or break out of the encirclement. This decision sealed the fate of the Sixth Army and marked a significant turning point within the war. When General Paulus surrendered on February 2nd, 1943, it was the first time in history that a German field marshal had been captured alive. This was a major humiliation for Hitler and a symbolic victory for the Allies. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad marked the beginning of a series of offensives that pushed the German forces back across Eastern Europe. It was a critical turning point that shifted the momentum of the war in favour of the Allies. The city of Stalingrad, renamed Volgograd in 1961, has become a place